Rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay.
We were happy to see nobody took a knee.
Oh, my gosh. Okay, there are minutes. They're over there. I tried to give them out as people came in, but they're right there on that table. With that said, looking for approval of the agenda from the committee members. John O'Connor? Approved?
So moved.
Good. Okay, B&F Chair's opening remarks. I'd like to comment on today's meeting as it pertains to the entire budget process. This three-day budget and finance meeting is part of an overall budget process that began back in September with guidance from this committee to the board. The Budget Committee will be performing a detailed review of a preliminary budget submitted by the GM, developed with input from the OP staff. At the end of this three-day process, the Budget and Finance Committee will submit recommendations to the board. It will be a letter from me totally having all the comments from the board, from this committee. Last year's was in total lockstep, and I expect the same this year. The board will review the budget presented by the GM along with the committee's recommendations, scheduled for end of January, not to be less than 90 days prior to the beginning of the next fiscal year. That's all in resolution FO2. The board will then provide any deemed adjustments to the GM. That'll be your board preliminary budget. In late January, the GM will present the board preliminary budget to the membership for feedback. I believe it's scheduled for January, I got it here somewhere.
27.
I got here,
I think.
January 27th. There'll be a meeting on the 20th. GM and B&F Chair conduct proposed budget hearing for the membership. On the 22nd, the B&F Committee will meet with the GM and consider any changes to the budget based on the budget hearing. Committee votes to forward recommendation budget to the board. On the 27th of January, Saturday, the GM will formally present the recommended budget to the Board of Directors. Good, John? JB? Okay, very much. Late January, late January, GM will present the board preliminary budget to the membership for feedback. Like I just mentioned, the GM will discuss the feedback received with the board. The board makes final changes to the board preliminary budget, which at this point becomes the final approved budget. From this final budget comes our assessments. I think there was a little confusion last year, so I tried to spell it out for everybody there. It's all in resolution F-02. Just want to point out this process is a commitment to transparency, input, review, analysis, and feedback by our bylaws, board, and staff. Okay. Just one other item I just want to mention, which I always do, especially these type of meetings. I just want to read out to everybody Ocean Pines' vision. Ocean Pines would be a premier resort community offering exceptional value and quality of life to property owners who are diverse in age, economic status, and interest. The mission of Ocean Pines to provide governance, administration, facilities, services, and amenities that are necessary to make Ocean Pines an attractive, affordable, safe, and enjoyable place to live and work. I know the first time I was on the B&F committee, it was the first thing I did was pull out what our mission statement and our vision is as an association. It's very important to me, and it helps me, and I believe the rest of this committee in looking at the budget. Just one other thing, I just wanted from the Budget and Finance Committee, we'd like to welcome Steve Phillips, our new Finance Director. Welcome to Ocean Pines, glad to have you on board. We would also, I'd like to give a shout out and thank you to Art Carmine, who I know puts a lot of effort into the budget process every year, and of course, John and his staff. All righty? With that, I did get a text from somebody, from a homeowner, who I guess last year and even any years I looked at the agenda, I didn't see anything as far as public comments, so I didn't include it this year. I definitely included it, the B&F committee, JB, we all welcome that. So I do have now time for public comments. What I'd ask, though, is if there are any, that you just limit it to today's agenda. Any public comments from anybody?
Yeah, I'd like to make a public comment.
Sure. I think you could just,
Mike?
we have mics here, but slow it down, I think we can hear you, to be honest with you.
Well, I understand it's streamlined.
Oh, okay.
Uh,
Then I don't know what to say.
So I
Yes,
want to
it's-
ensure that
Yeah, whatever you need.
membership here is.
Okay.
Bring one over here. There you go.
Slobodan Trendik, 20 Drawbridge Road. With projected $1.4 million in losses, the board should have insisted on the development of a deficit reduction plan. That kind of plan usually calls for budget cuts, cost-cutting measures, and revenue increases. When it did not happen, I proposed my motion last year, which was to mandate a 5% target for overall cuts in recurring expenditure. That was and still is the right and best position for the board to take. There are many items that must be questioned. That is the GM's job and now the committee's job. If the GM's budget proposes to raise fees, then reduction in spending by at least an equal amount must occur. That is what I would call good management and fiscally responsible board attempting to address a serious deficit problem. What to me is the most revealing about the GM's draft budget is the proposed 5-year $33 per property a special assessment for prior year losses, while at the same time budgeting for $40 loss at the yacht club for the coming year. In my view, this is fiscal irresponsibility. This document states the proposed budget is a balanced budget, but it requires a 27% raise in HOA fees. Blaming the losses on inaccurate revenue budgeting is not really a common sense. The losses were incurred because past management failed to control costs in the face of an unrealistic budgeted revenue. Management must be focused on what they can control, the cost side of the equation. Thank you for your attention.
Okay, thank you. Any, well, slow down, I want to wait for the picture.
Picture a mugshot.
Smile.
Bang the table, something. Anybody else on the public comments? No? Okay, we have included public comments at the beginning of each session for all 3 days. So with that said, let's move on. At 9:15, everybody has a copy of the agenda. I'm not sure if the people just came in, they are right there. At 9:15, JB has his administration, the GM, the finance, and he'll talk about deficit recovery. Okay. Let's, you all want to start with your questioning on the executive summary, or you want to go right to it? Your choice, just somebody tell me. Anybody on the BNF committee, there is a very nice executive summary at the beginning that JB's team put together. Anybody want to comment on that? Anybody from the BNF committee? Any comments on that?
I'd say it's greatly appreciated. Executive summary, well done.
One of the best executive summaries I've seen since I've been involved in this about 2000.
Well, I try to make things readable from a perspective that everybody can get something out of it.
Very good.
The more you want to dig in, the deeper that one wants to go, fine. But something that can consolidate everything for, everybody can read, a few pages. Then those who want more information, Budget and Finance Committee, board members, and others who are interested in particular financial pieces can drill down as far as they want to.
But the way you went through it by department was excellent. Okay.
Yeah.
I think, and I wanted to point, as we discussed yesterday, I think the realistic look at revenue is a welcome sign in this budget. However, I think we all agree yesterday that we really have some work to do on the expense side, and we'll get into all those
Right.
issues, but overall, we really appreciate the the revenue part appearing to be realistic, as opposed to the last couple of years.
If I may, Mr. Chairman, two of the premises, overarching premises of developing this was the deficit recovery of $369,000 plus the million, and then fixing a broken budget for the current year. And so to tackle that, one was getting more accurate revenue figures, and then if you'll go back to when the Budget and Finance Committee met with the Board of Directors to talk about budget guidance, I was specific to ask the question, is there any target number here? You know, if it's 0, then we need to say 0 now, because it saves everybody a whole lot of heartache. It's all pretty easy to put together a 0 increase. And that didn't come out of that meeting.
That's right.
And thus, you know, I said, okay, let's try and be as reasonable as we can. Let's deal with the deficit piece. Obviously, a recovery aspect was done by the association in prior years for a previous deficit. So I didn't think that was out of line with what the association had done in the past. Obviously, that may not be what we want to do, but that was part of that premise. And then the other part was fixing the broken budget. And again, going back to budgeted revenue. And there are a lot of things that we can do differently on the expense side. And I would certainly look to do some other things in some future years. Not to dismiss anything, but I wasn't going to come in and slice and dice draconianly without a lot of knowledge going in, which unfortunately I didn't. But that doesn't mean that we didn't look at things and try to be reasonable in whether or not we were going to increase something or decrease something. And at we talked a little bit yesterday about a lot of different things. And I think this will be a good process. And going back to the chairman's opening comments about transparency, it is a process. And the more people who are involved in it, the better. As we move forward in years, there'll be more committee involvement in the development of each departmental budget. And hopefully we'll see more of the members attending these work sessions in support or in scrutiny of the budget numbers that we produce. So those were the two overarching premises. And then the conservative on revenue, expenses based on actual, and a review of why that number exists and how did we get there. So that was my premise, and took a lot of guidance from the Board and Budget and Finance Committee guidance meeting, and some of the things that were in a lot of things that were in the guidance itself were addressed. And we talked a little bit about that yesterday, about, where did the 3% come from? That came straight out of the guidance. A plan to deal with the deficit recovery, that was in the guidance as well. So it's a process, and we'll get, we touched on a lot of different things yesterday. That might make it pretty easy, but anyway,
Good.
as far as opening, that's my shot.
No, that was good. JB, I agree with a lot of the points you made. I was gonna make them myself. It's better that you made them. One thing I could tell everybody in the homeowners association, everybody that's here, JB definitely has reached out to this Budget and Finance Committee. There has been much dialogue between the two. I believe everybody here has had a
John,
voice.
could you speak up a little bit, please?
Everybody here has had a voice in, everybody's had a voice in what they saw with this first proposed budget, as well as before we even got to this point. So there's a lot of interaction between this committee and the GM, and more so than I've ever seen. As far as this executive summary, Gene said it before me, well put together, not talking about certain numbers or whatever, but how it was approached. The GM's only been here 4 months. He touched on every point. Points that I was concerned might not have been touched on at this stage, they were touched on. We were able to talk about it yesterday with him. The team will go line by line and give everybody the transparency, and JB and his team over these 3 days. JB mentioned a guidance that this budget committee gave X amount of months ago. That is being re-looked at also. There was a lot of dialogue about it yesterday. Obviously, with the situation we've had in this past year, JB kind of touched that. There's going to be some hard calls that are going to have to be made. So with that said, let's just get into the first section. All righty? So the first section on the agenda after the summary is that admin is the first department. So anybody want Anybody? Anybody want to start off with questions they had on the line items?
I don't have a question, I just have an observation that the last 4 or 5 line items under depreciation on that page are there for information purposes. And they do not enter into the, any of the monthly reports that are given, because the monthly reports are done on a cash-only basis, cash in, cash out. So these depreciation numbers are there for information purposes.
Okay. Anybody else?
I'm just
Go ahead.
curious as to why we're not funding depreciation for roads again, which is a charge under our resolution on developing a budget
John, that's
and sound thinking, I believe.
Yeah, I don't disagree with funding the road depreciation. To me, it was an issue of timing in relation to our reserve study and all of the reserve elements of our budget. Road reserve, bulkhead reserve, capital, replacement capital reserve, and if you, in the executive summary, I address a need for a new capital fund, if you would. And we talked about bulkheads yesterday, and I think we'll get back to that later on, but the intent there was we hadn't done it before, it would add 211,000, I think it was.
188.
And so that was part of the reason, was one, with the simple math, and two was we hadn't done it before, and three, the time to do that, in my opinion, was deal with all of those reserves as we finish up the reserve study. And so there are policy decisions at the board level that still need to be made on what do we want as our minimum balance in the reserves to be at the end of every year. What inflation factor do we want to utilize? Because traditionally, the inflation factor is not even factored into a reserve study. Now it is, and that might change that number of our annual CTR, contribution to replacement reserves. So whether it was replacement or bulkhead or road, we just left it out from as far as increasing those contributions this year.
Okay, we have a separate section on reserves coming up, I think.
Okay, go ahead. I don't think road depreciation has anything to do with reserves anymore than building and pool depreciation, and furniture and equipment depreciation.
All right.
They all go into reserves, but you do that based on the depreciation. Or a more sound, engineering study. We don't have a reserve study, which is kind of crazy since we got one in April 2 years ago, and it hadn't gone anywhere. I mean, I just think you gotta fund. There's a reason there's a resolution that's been on the books for years that says fund it. We haven't funded it for a couple of years for history's sake because we had a cash cow in Annapolis. We don't
Right.
anymore.
So this would be a point, Joe, of something we'd be making a recommendation on.
We already did.
And we've done it many times.
Several times.
Well, maybe we'll do it in a bolder print. I forgot what I was gonna say. I had a question. The reserve study, and again, the GM had to put together this budget, and I thought we would have a reserve study by now.
Me too.
We don't. I did inquire about it yesterday with the treasurer and a few other people. Unfortunately, we don't have it. I believe we'll have it soon. And JB, I know you had some dates or whatever.
Yeah, well, we were working with, to get numbers back to Doug Green, the consultant on
Doug?
the reserve study.
Dave?
Doug Green,
Yes, Doug.
with DMA Associates. Public Works Department was working on scrubbing the list of all of our capital items that the reserve study incorporates. What didn't need to be in there because we no longer had it, what needed to be in there because it's new and it never had made the list, as well as reviewing, okay, our estimated life remaining on a particular piece of equipment, is it 2 years or is it 10 years, based upon those changes. So that all impacts that bottom line number. We were scrubbing that list right before Christmas.
Right.
So that should be done before the end of the month.
The end of this month?
Sent to DMA, and then, so I'd say sometime in February, we'll have that. And I would see that February, March timeframe, that the Board of Directors, Budget and Finance Committee, we ought to be having that meeting where, you know, I don't know our history with DMA and reserve studies or whatnot. But I've done in the past is had both groups, both those leadership groups together, for a presentation from DMA to go through, okay, and then you can see how the chart changes, with the minimum balance and inflation rates and what our level of funding needs to be versus what we're currently doing. And that would change that whole reserve complexion, if you would, of what we need to put in it, whether it's the roads, bulkheads, et cetera. And I think that it's a huge piece of the financial puzzle, and we just don't have that information yet.
Well, I think as we discussed yesterday, you know, everything, I mean, we can really focus on all the operational issues and the capital funding issues, but, you know, this, if there's any way we can get this reserve study to us before the budget, I mean, this budget, as you said, is gonna be heavily dependent on that. And it's, you know, we need that information. It's time the reserve committee get it done. Otherwise, you know, what we propose as the proposed budget and what the board of directors is gonna be looking at is still gonna be in flux depending on what comes back from the reserve study. So it's, you know, as you said, it's a big piece of the pie, and we
Yeah.
need it sooner rather than later. I'm not sure getting it in March is,
Yeah,
Doesn't help
I
us
just
this
didn't
year.
see that happening before this budget had to be adopted. That's why.
Well, as long as everyone
that's why I
understands
was
that, then.
in the executive summary, that's why I was addressing all those capital needs as a sort of a separate
Right.
thing to be dealt with later.
Go ahead.
Are we happy with the reserve study that we have?
As in DMA's work, or what we had before, or,
Well,
I think the answer is no, because it wasn't complete. There was a lot of questions about what was in it that shouldn't be, and what was not in it that should be, and that's why they went back to.
yeah.
Right, so
Yeah,
the,
do an analysis
any
to
reserve
cleanse the
study
list.
has to be managed, if you would. I've seen good reserve studies, I've seen bad ones. And things get changed in it that, well, why did we, you know, and I get the next one 3 years later, and the estimated life on stuff is the same as it was 3 years ago. How's that possible? So, I'm not saying that was the case here, but I've seen same companies do really good ones and same companies do
Right.
poor ones.
but more
So
importantly.
but they have to be
something interesting.
managed, but not manipulated.
right, so let me just jump in. So being on the reserve work group or whatever, to answer the original question, the calculation that was done years ago, whatever, actually became obsolete in the sense that just this building alone, what was projected in there to look at was a new building, and now we're doing something different here. We noticed, the work group, that there were a lot of items that needed to change or be updated. So I would not rely on that prior reserve study. And I think that was across the board in the work group. We did kind of cleanse it a little bit quick and dirty in the last meeting or whatever, trying to come up with an idea. And we came up with something, but it was all agreed that it should be pushed down to the department heads for everybody to do a review to get the best case scenario on our assets up to date, which is what we're in the process that JB's doing.
But
So-
John,
So the answer was no for the original one.
I think more importantly, besides the item by, you know, the item by item scrubbing, you know, there has to be the policy decision made on what the levels are gonna be, what percentage, and what the inflation factor's gonna be.
Right.
And that's the big impacting factor on that reserve study, as far as I
No, you're
see,
right.
the way I
Right.
see it.
But you
That's
gotta
right.
get the existing assets
Yeah.
and the value of
You have to have the datas in there before those policy
Before you
decisions
can
can be
make
made.
those
And that's,
policies.
I
that-
agree.
that's what I had seen that hadn't happened so
Yeah.
far well, I mean, the end game hadn't happened, obviously, but it hadn't happened because all the specific details of it
Right.
If you
weren't
use the
there.
numbers as presented, you wouldn't have appropriate, levels of reserves because those numbers weren't
Right.
always
You know,
correct.
and that big question we talked a little bit about yesterday was, you know, at what percentage?
Right.
Marty, I think it was you that mentioned, you know, is it 50% that we funded, 10% or 20%? Makes a huge difference in what all those contributions are.
I have a question, could you tell me about, a little bit about that capital expenditure for software? Is that the enterprise, overall software package that we're looking at, or is that just and does that contain, the accounting piece? That,
Are you on the capital list for
$400,000?
yeah, on
Yeah,
your,
that's the management software for the association.
for the whole association?
Yeah.
And does it include the accounting software?
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah. That may end up being a high number.
Right.
But that's a placeholder in there for what that may cost.
I was hoping to do that as a separate area, because I
Yeah.
wanted a lot of questions on that.
Has the process started to search for that?
Yes.
software?
Yep.
How far along are we?
We have we expect 5 returns on our RFP. We've already had 3 actual demos. One of those withdrew. And that deadline for the other 2 is this Friday, the 12th. And then the technology work group will be getting those 5 proposals and going through those, and if we have additional demos to do, then we'll do those.
I have another quick question. I don't, under the insurance, I am totally ignorant of what is a deductible buyback insurance. I don't know what that means. This is personal education. Maybe we can do it offline. I don't know what it means.
And I had one question under the insurance too, JB.
Okay.
Have we gotten a quote from our broker on additional flood insurance coverage? And has the board decided to raise the flood insurance coverage on the yacht club? I think it was just the yacht club they were looking at. And if so, if not, then, is that number's gotta be baked into here also?
Okay. I will get back to you tomorrow, if I
J-
can.
JB, while we're,
If I may, just as a protocol piece, if I don't know an answer to something, I'm taking sort of the notes and sort of create them as action items, if we would, from this day. And then as soon as I can get the answers back to you, we'll share those out with the full committee.
that's excellent.
Okay?
JB, while we're in insurance, and I know, and I believe the insurance is broken down by department, allocated to department, so when I look at the insurance line here,
Correct.
that's the part for admin. Can we just take a step back? How much is total insurance for Ocean Ponds? 360, 400,
I thought it was over 400, wasn't it?
I think it was 400 and something.
400 and something? Okay,
That was, I think it was including workers' comp.
okay.
Yeah.
The only, what I'm getting at, I know it's in that ballpark of 400, the only question I
On
have
that
there.
summary page, by chance? Art, is it in the summary pages by chance?
It's all right. The main question I have is, the main
No,
question I
okay.
have on it is this. I know it's around 400,000.
Yeah.
Main question I have is this. Did we take into account in this budget any possible increase? I know last year I saw a
Yes.
situation.
10%.
Okay. That was my question. That's all.
Not in liability insurance.
Oh, okay.
But in general, the overall on that 400, we didn't just take last year's number, we did
Did it?
build in an
Was the
increase.
10% on the health insurance?
That was on medical
That's right.
insurance, health insurance.
Okay.
Yeah, I pretty much took what the current insurance rates were.
73, that's what I'm questioning.
Yeah.
See here?
for
That's current on
this
the,
year.
I'm sorry, he was.
current on the regular insurance, it was a increment of 10% on the health insurance.
Okay. So we did build in, We haven't built
only
in,
on health
only on
insurance. We
certain
didn't build
pieces.
in any increase.
Right, because see,
in
right
the
here, it's the
general
same
liability.
exact as this year, that's why I was asking.
It's what we expected to end up this year.
It's what we expected this year, so then,
So there was no budgeted increase in the overall,
should there be?
perhaps.
Just based upon history the last couple of years? I would say yes, no?
Has insurance been increasing?
Yeah, that's what I'm asking. Honestly, I put that down as a point to look at because,
The
if
increases
there was an
in the
increase-
industry have been less than they used to be,
okay,
and a lot less, actually.
It's a more competitive market, so, I
Right.
mean, if our rates are going up, we need to do one of two things, or maybe both. Shop it, or the second thing is get our brokers in here and say, look, you gotta do better than this. And you'd be surprised how many times they will do better than, they're making money off of us now after the first couple years of the policies. So there's an incentive for them to hold on to this business because administratively, they're paying, the administrative costs are baked in to the premiums. So, we may be able to do better. A lot of times, all you have to do is ask. Because they're gonna wanna hold on to this account.
okay. JB, just tell me when you're ready. I got a couple questions. So I'd like to just look at accounting fees, legal fees, and contract services. Glad to see in the budget decreases in all. Just want to talk a little bit, I think it's a good time to talk about it. We have talked about it in the Budget and Finance Committee meetings monthly, but the accounting fees go down. Is that because of what was labeled, last year we did some type of deep dive? So,
Yeah,
so it's
that
last
was-
year's fee, less the deep dive, plus some kind of incremental increase for the overall audit? Do I have that right?
I'm not sure if we had
I just thought the overall
we
deep
had
dive
anything
cost a lot more than that.
I'm not sure what the next audit engagement will cost.
Okay, but what I'm saying is, did you put in flat with last year, or did you put in some type of increment?
I believe I put in just what was last year.
Right, because we
without the
weren't
dive.
needing to do the deep dive again.
That's
So
right, that's right. I
That's
just
what
didn't-
came out of
I
there.
totally agree, I hope not. I just thought the deep dive, and that cost more than whatever that $9,000 is, so that's what I'm just asking. And I don't have a problem if you did have an increase in there, or you're projecting an increase on the audit. That's all I'm asking.
It's still considerably more than previous years.
That's a correct statement.
I see legal fees are jumping down.
Yeah, that's my
considerably.
next one, let me just get to this. Okay, so, just in my mind, I just can't back into the number without projecting that there is an increase in the budget in there,
Right.
increase to the audit, which is fine. Like Dick had just mentioned, Dick, you can jump into it, but on the legal fees, glad to see there was a decrease, bringing it more in line outside of last year's interesting, unique year.
It's an increase over the budgeted number, but it's a decrease from the actuals for this year.
That's right.
That is certainly would be the hope that we don't have as much as we had this current year. I cringe every time I have to sign that check, right now.
So did I.
The 75 includes, just your general legal services, and then, adding to that, anticipated, need for
Okay, so there is
over
some
and
type of
above.
anticipation in there, there
Yeah.
is something, it was just a kind of a unique or interesting year.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah, the 150 is gonna be about right, and, getting to half of that, hopefully we can get there.
What's close to what 217 actuals were, which is probably the most reasonable estimate we have, right?
What's that? I'm
But your
sorry.
budgeting is close to what the 217 actuals were, which is probably a reasonable estimate from the past.
Yeah.
Correct,
To bringing it forward.
correct.
Yeah, I was glad to see that, getting back more in line, just hope we can do it. I do have a question for now, I just want to make sure I'm not breaking any bylaws or anything. I can take questions from the audience, yes? Oh, I can't, okay, because you keep raising your hand. I mean, I don't have a problem with it, to be honest with you,
It's
but
okay, thanks, thanks.
if everybody else is okay with it, I'm okay with taking them. Everybody else, anybody have an objection to taking it, or am I like breaking a law here? Doug's okay if I take it?
Joe, are we breaking a law?
Joe, it's okay, I have no problem, I have no problem taking the comments, the questions, as long as,
Contrary, I applaud the effort to transparency.
thank you, Joe.
As chair,
Yeah, I was just going to add to
Please
your-
stand up and,
I was just going to add to your comment, Mr. Chairman, about the accounting fees that you were questioning because it's doubled since previous years.
right,
In fact, we did have a couple of competitive proposals last year, both were under 25K. So the projected budgeted amount for next year being 43K plus, it either calls for some additional auditing or accounting, or it's overestimating what past auditing services cost us on an annual basis. So if we looked at the past RFPs and bids, that can be brought down to definitely under 30, if not under 25K.
okay, no, I appreciate that, and I do want to answer, because I actually have some background in this one.
Thank you for
Yeah,
bringing
yeah,
it
no,
up, and I just wanted to
again,
give you
I'm
some-
open to it, as long as everybody else is okay. What you said on, and I do understand about the 3 bids, and believe me, I'm an advocate of that on everything. There's one thing when you're dealing with accounting firms and how they price it in, I only know it because I've been on that side, is when they give you a price, if we're gonna bounce every year, they kind of build in that over time, that first year their costs are here, and maybe they know that next year's like anything else, it'll be here, so they kind of balance it. So they give you a lower price, and they kind of make it up over time. So it's kind of hard to bounce year to year. I wouldn't recommend it unless we have a serious situation with the auditors. Yes, last year, if there were 3 competitive bids, that should have been there. For me to recommend now, bouncing again, I wouldn't do that. I understand your point, though, more so for last year. I also understood, I thought TGM, if I got the initials right, was doing a good job. I understand about changing firms eventually or whatever like that, but I wouldn't recommend doing it again. I also thought they did a pretty good job. Their fees were higher. They're coming from out of Ocean Pines, so obviously there are fees there for their, what do you call those expenses? Their out-of-pocket expenses, and that's where there's a big difference.
And I think that, and understanding that, I think, again, we ought to go back to them and say, you know, can you do any better? You know, that, if I understood the RFPs from last year, the firm that was chosen was the highest bid, and the fact that they're up in, in Pennsylvania or up in the
Somewhere
northern
near
end,
Baltimore, somewhere near Baltimore.
makes absolutely no sense to me. I understand what you're saying, John, but, you know, we have a RFP process for, you know, for a reason. And whatever the reason was to go with the highest firm last year, I think we need, I think we should go back to them and say, look, we had lower bids, and if you want to keep the business, you need to bring your numbers down. And if they don't, they don't, and then we look
We
around.
just concentrate. And look, I understand your point. Believe me, with any supplier or vendor, and if that's what the committee recommends, fine. I'm just trying to explain to everybody how it works. If that's what the B&F committee, I understand about cost sometimes. The lower cost for X amount may cost you more in another way. I'm also saying, I did say last year was the time to do it, to bounce for a couple $1,000s, not what I would do. But if every dollar counts, you know, so be it, as long as we do due diligence, so. Okay, just one other counter, yeah, go ahead,
Yeah,
I'm
just a
sorry.
quick question. Do we bid these annually, every 3 years?
Well, that's good, that's a good question.
I don't think there's a set policy on that,
Well, if we did,
or standard business practice.
well, if we did 3 years, we would take John's point into account, perhaps.
Yeah, I mean,
If upfront costs are absorbed the first year, maybe a little less the second.
if we haven't done an RFP for whatever it may be, whether it's audit services, legal services, reserve studies, insurance, health insurance, if we haven't done an RFP for brokerage services, probably in a long time.
Right, that has to be,
Most people don't.
that has to be.
That it's good business practice to do that at least every 3 to 5 years.
Yeah.
And then usually the brokers are supposed to shop it every year. The different with, for the auditing services and legal services, you stick with them for a little while. But I've certainly seen organizations change auditors, after, a decade with one. They do it for transparency and good business practice.
Right.
Nothing against the
But I just
company
got-
that we've been to.
Yeah, that's right. Just one more thing on this point, and from my end, what I just thought of, we have a new finance lead. When you make a lot of change all at once, which a lot of times, situation possibly last year, if not definitely, there's too much change. I mean, if you want to change accountants or put it out to bid, so be it, or ask them to come back and bid again, so be it. There's a lot of change. We have a new finance lead. We have change. I was in there last year. In fact, my first day was probably the first day that the auditors were there. New auditors, it's a lot. New director, new GM, whatever. I wouldn't recommend it just for a few $1,000s, but I'm just giving you how it works.
Well, that's a valid point.
And
Yep.
they came back to me, on, I guess, just watch how I say it, on what had to be done before I got there, and what they saw and what they had to do back then, and there was an additional cost. I don't see it here, I don't know why, but, I don't want that to happen again. So you may be looking at, hey, I'm gonna save a couple $1,000s to get a better price. It could cost you in other ways.
I agree, for a couple $1,000s, it could be quite disruptive, and it,
Oh, trust me,
particularly with a new
Trust me.
finance director coming in,
trust me,
it's almost worthwhile to evaluate later on.
trust me. And I wouldn't wanna go through that again.
After this year, but we won't worry about it so much.
Next year, we'll be asking you for,
And his staff is already
Go ahead,
probably
so Marty
preparing
had- yeah,
to give
Marty
them
had-
information for the audit, so you have to revisit all that.
Marty had some questions?
There's two quick points. Our last audit firm was here for over 19 years. I don't think it was bid much, if at all. When you mentioned 3 to 5 years, and it may not be law for us, but if we were a publicly owned non-profit, it would be required under law that every 3 to 5 years that the lead auditor changes. Not gets bid, you're out.
Right.
Next
It
guy.
sends the right message.
Well, and it's smart business.
Yes,
The
You said
biggest,
that's
the
a
big,
law.
the biggest,
it's
You
not.
said that's on all.
yeah, Sarbanes Act, whatever it is.
So it's actually,
I know, we're talking about this in a separate meeting.
But I'll take a look.
Okay.
It is. But, look, if you keep the same auditor for 20 years, the
Oh, we-
biggest
we
thief on your
understand.
payroll might be your auditor.
Whoa. Oh, God. All right.
All we're saying is
Subtlety's not a strong suit.
with a
Never
new
has
director,
been.
a new director of finance, it's gonna be.
We made that point.
He shouldn't be making.
We're not gonna do that to him. I won't do that to you. Just one, contract services?
okay.
Go ahead, Jay.
Making the point that, okay, from, sorry, on the legal fees, again, reducing from the current year actual, but it is an increase from the last year's budget. Contractual services, is an increase from last year's budget, but substantially less than our forecast for the year. Most of that's in the computer services, and that may actually go down further based upon our software question of the 400,000. That may reduce the need for these the additional services on that end of it. By the way, that was one of the pieces that wasn't budgeted for
Right,
last year,
right,
or for the current year.
right.
There were several things, I'm going to regress for a moment, Mr. Chairman.
That's fine.
That not only were the revenue numbers way off, but we had some expenses that were incorporated into the budget after the fact that weren't budget amendments. We had the 20% discount. That was after the budget had been adopted. That impacted everything. We also had several expense items that were not budgeted for that were pursued anyway. And those are either partially accounted for here or reduced.
Right.
in the proposed budget.
Yeah, let me just add something on that before I forget. So you had mentioned about the 20%, you mentioned the other changes. Agree with you on all of that. It did happen. One thing a lot of people don't realize, and I realized it sitting in my living room when I saw that they put through those changes, I said, all of that is gonna flush through accounting, and it's gonna be a mess in there. I didn't realize I'd be in there in the summer, and thank God, Art came in also. But that all flushed through finance. There was a cost in finance to account for it, to try to control it, and/or process it with the other changes. There was a cost in there, and that's part of your financial cost that you're gonna see when we get in there to finance. So there was a lot of other reasons and costs that went along with that, so I do understand that. I do understand what you're saying. I did mention the contract services, which you did answer. I just want to go into that a little more.
Sure.
And I have heard this before, the new system takes care of everything. It's gonna do this, it's gonna do that. So, which it can, and I believe it will, but what happened here has to be addressed, and hopefully it's being addressed right now, in the sense that we have an outside source who we outsourced that type of work to, and then at the same time, we started to build in our
I mean, internal
in-house,
force, yeah,
and we had a cost.
right,
So
which
then-
wasn't budgeted for
That's right.
at all.
And then, and then you make changes, you bring in somebody new or something like that, and then nobody can answer it. That's all cost. So hopefully this is being addressed now. I do see it's kind of hard if I'm not looking at the wrong line here. So the forecast is still going up, so I'm not totally sure if we've addressed it this year. It does look like you're addressing it going forward. There will be a cost for the service for that system, and I do want to talk about that system separate. I know we got onto it here, because, and another way you look at it, when you have the system is in, well, that system, any system I ever put in or was a part of, I had to show savings somewhere, because you don't just get a system. Now, there's other reasons here that, after 20, 30 years, but usually, does your head count go up? Does your head count go down? We invested all this money in the system. Do we still need all the players that we need? That comes into play. And maybe we do. Maybe we do, because there's so much more going on here. We haven't invested in systems in years that I can tell. We definitely need it for controls, process, for the procedure, for the controls, for the reporting. So there should be savings there over time. So I'm just saying, I'm not gonna say that we're gonna save on this because we're putting in a new system, definitely not in the beginning. I hope we can. But over time, I would expect something. That's the only point I have on that. Anybody else that's familiar with systems or whatever, feel free.
Do we have an do we have an IT manager on our payroll now? Or are we?
I know you do.
Oh, yeah, but you're not on our payroll.
No.
Oh. Do we have an IT manager on our payroll now?
We have one person who's does a lot of IT for us, and then we have a consultant who sort of takes the lead, if you would. That was the position that was not budgeted for at all in the current year budget. And that's something that we need to address.
Because for a number of years, for 4 or 5 years running, we had an IT manager budgeted for, and we never hired one.
Okay?
I didn't know if
Well, we did hire
Well,
one,
we-
but he
we-
didn't last very long, right?
Yeah, we had a lot, we have a lot of contractual services with BDK, that's the right
BDK.
acronym?
BDK. A lot of money.
And a lot of money going to them. They're the ones who run our current software management system, Lanza. And
Well, let me ask the question, are we budgeting anywhere for an IT manager in this budget?
no,
No, just got Pat in there, right?
yeah.
Really, don't put it up. Somebody back there had a comment on IT or something? Ted said-
Page 4.2.
4.2?
Yeah, under finance.
Uh,
We don't have 4.2.
We don't have that page.
Right.
It's a salary page.
Right, and we're getting into individuals, and we can't go there.
Yeah, I agree. We agreed at this point, we're not getting into individuals. We don't want to break out anything like that. We're in total agreement on that at this stage.
I mean, there's a
But we can't talk
significant
about
difference.
positions.
I will say this,
We can talk about positions.
there's a
Well-
significant difference in the number related to that IT manager than what was in.
And I just want to clarify.
Current
we
year
can
That's
talk
right.
about
There was-
Why would there be any number if we don't have an IT manager, it's not in the budget, why would there be any number at all in here? It ought to be a zero. Or,
Right.
we're looking for an IT manager, one or the other, can't be both.
So he had a position in there. He had it budgeted at a certain amount. He filled that spot.
We budgeted it for 3 or 4 years and never
I'm just telling you what
spent the
happened last year, to the best of my knowledge, and when I tried to find out what was going on. So we did have this budget, we had it at a certain amount. He filled, the acting GM filled it with a person at this amount, that much lower. That person does get overtime, but he did fill that position. He's not here. He filled that position with Pat. That was my understanding, when I asked that question. So he had in the budget an IT person at X amount.
So is that the person we're talking about on 4.2?
So if that's who you
So
have,
we
then
can
that's
move
your
on.
answer to him.
Yeah.
So the answer is yes.
The answer is yes.
But he wouldn't have known, how would he have known that?
No, you didn't, that's,
To
Okay.
answer your question, should we have an IT manager in the budget?
You're asking me?
I'm
We
asking
do.
I mean, I'll
anybody.
answer it. I'll
we
answer it.
do.
I think you need it.
We do.
Yeah, we do have one.
We do.
By that title and that moniker, yes.
I don't have 4.2.
All right, well, I'm trying.
I know. Again, talking, when we're
Yeah.
getting into personnel.
Exactly,
If we're talking about individuals, we've got to avoid that.
exactly.
On a
I'm talking about a
conceptual
spot.
basis, I believe we can talk about positions.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yes.
not personnel.
Right.
Right.
We have somebody acting like an IT manager conceptually in this budget.
In, what sections would HR costs be in?
He answered that yesterday. The consultant, you're not hiring an HR
HR is.
person?
HR is in
There's an
the,
HR.
Finance, or is it in this
it's,
tab?
that's under manager,
Under manager?
under the general manager.
Okay, we'll wait till we get there.
Which,
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's a good question, but okay, so that's where that is. All right, so we're on admin, kind of put the sort, we did touch on it, I want to put that kind of when we get to capital, that's okay. Any other questions on admin before we move on?
I just, quick question, it says foreclosure write-offs. Are we writing off foreclosures, selling the bad paper, doing something with it? Because a foreclosure doesn't eliminate the debt like bankruptcy does.
no, it's further along in the process when you actually write that off, but there can be some.
I tell you, when I write off a bad debt, when I see them in the obituaries. Oh, no, that's not true, I go after the estate.
Okay.
I mean, those debts are still
Yeah.
good.
I mean, usually I get a recommendation from the auditor before you, of what you need to write off or not.
It's easier to write them off. I got that.
Well,
You got country club under insurance,
All right.
insurance in this
Okay.
section, because that's just as a place to park it, now that we don't have a country club tab.
It was the upstairs portion, which is,
I got you.
Right.
And we don't have a country club tab, so.
yeah.
Okay. We good with, general admin? Done? Okay. Next. Next section, general manager's office. Questions, anybody, line by line?
The big
Same
increase
as your
there was
question,
the
Jason.
contractual services, and that's where the HR consultant, that was averaged at, I think it was $50 an hour for 540 hours.
What was it, 13,000 or something?
Yeah, 13,000.
So, okay, so.
Equivalent of 10 hours a week, but it could be, it's gonna be more sometimes and less others.
Okay.
So if we had, let's say if we had an HR manager, would we also be saving maybe some legal costs as well?
That's a good question.
Yes,
to attorneys
but
or
I
something?
wouldn't lower the 75K figure.
Right. The answer would be, you would hope so. What we did, what Ocean Pines did last year was we did utilize the law firm that had an HR service. We utilized that for our questions. I asked for it. The board and the GM, acting GM, approved it. We did utilize it. Hopefully, there is some savings there with this. Obviously, it's gonna be cheaper by the hour. So to answer your question, yes, but then on my end, are we still budgeting anything utilizing that law firm for HR services? Was any of that in the 75?
There may be need of it,
I think so.
so, yeah. I mean,
Okay,
I'll ask the question.
because I would.
Do we have in the budget hiring someone to be an HR person? Because we talked yesterday about things like job descriptions and salary ranges, and that's all. falls into
That's
HR.
all happening sooner rather than later. That will be in this portion of this,
Yeah.
between now and May 1.
But, yeah, I mean, that's
working
something
on all
else been
that.
recommended for the past 3 or 5 years. IT and HR.
So-
Right.
employee-
The board's already directed that we do that, and that's, I'm in the process now of getting hold of a couple people to see which one we want to utilize.
So that's been carved out of the HR concept and being addressed right now?
Yes.
What,
The job descriptions and
Yeah.
review
Yes.
of personnel manual, all that
Yes.
type of stuff,
Yes.
that's gonna happen in the next few months.
It would be,
have
Back to the
firm?
question,
the-
do we have
the-
an HR person in the budget to employ one?
No, this is an HR
No.
consultant, this is
HR
that 13,000
consultant.
under
Okay.
contractual services.
right.
And they'll be overseeing the job descriptions and all that?
Question for us, it
Yeah.
should be.
Well,
it would almost seem to me that if you can get rid of your HR consultant, and maybe you had some legal fees associated with HR, maybe that's 5K or so, but there's probably other costs that other people are doing to support HR, admin kind of things, where people have 401K questions and enrollments and all sorts of things. I'd almost bet that you could probably reduce some of that administration, you could save this money, save your legal costs, and hire an HR manager, and you're probably not too far off, not too far of a different delta as far as cost.
I was clearly under the impression the board wanted an HR manager hired, and they had it approved and in the budgets for the last 4 years or so.
Yes.
And, I'm not saying it's right or wrong, I'm just saying the board had it in the past 4 budgets or so. And, if that's their, I guess we gotta get a consensus from the board. If they think there should be an HR manager, then we probably should have it in the budget. I just,
We should
And
have,
then
we should
hire
have a
them.
consensus here, whether they should have,
What?
we should recommend it.
what?
we should recommend
I
that
gotta
we
answer
they
this.
have one.
Okay, so, and I hear all that, and believe me, I was on that side 2 or 3 years ago. I think what's best here from this committee is that we are recommending that there should be X amount of money for HR services. Leave it up to the GM on whether he wants to hire somebody with that budgeted amount, or go out and have some combination at this time of a consultant / utilizing the law firm's HR. I mean, we should be saying, that, okay, X amount of money for an HR service, and then that should be up to the GM on how he spends it for the need. Somebody had a question? Joe?
Someone suggested, I believe it was Steve Rako mentioned to me at a board meeting sometime back, that Ocean Pines Association should consider hiring an in-house attorney. His opinion was that we could hire an attorney. The county attorney's only making, for Worcester County, the county attorney's only making about $100,000 a year. He said for $100,000 or so, we could hire an attorney in-house, eliminate most of our outside attorney fees, and have that individual also handle HR. And we're gonna hire an HR person full-time for whatever. It seems to me that the board would consider, and this committee perhaps looking at recommendations,
Yeah,
to recommend an in-house attorney.
I hear it. Any other questions? I hear that.
One of the things that I have also been doing, amongst many other things, and that's researching
You put that down.
firms that do
With Joseph.
do the whole HR thing. And that's still ongoing, I just haven't come up
Right.
with anything yet.
Right,
to Resolve that.
And look, that's up to you. My opinion, definitely need money allocated in this budget for HR services. Obviously, the legal services, Joe, we're gonna not write that down. I mean, I think I heard that too. I'm just saying, how you distribute that HR service money, I leave that up to the GM. I'm just telling you, you need it. If you feel you can find the right person and that, but that's up to you. If you feel you can do it within that guideline of the budget or whatever you think you need for it, I would use the consultant and/or hire an attorney that has, which is somebody we dealt with, who has an HR background. You need it. How he does it,
We don't
It's up
need
to
to
him.
make that part of our recommendation,
We're
because
making a
he's already got the money in there.
right. That's what I'm
Yeah,
saying.
you know,
Correct.
again,
Well,
talking,
well, that went up.
And he's going to use it as he sees.
That's what I'm saying. So, whether he hires an HR person or not is up to him.
it's
We
13,000.
recommended that. They put the money in the budget.
It's 13, I
That's
think.
where we're at.
Yeah, 13, right.
before we make a recommendation to hire a lawyer to deal with these type of issues, you gotta remember that, that salary is a number, but, an in-house attorney is not gonna be able to handle some of the issues that come up in regarding to HR things. There's, there can be an inherent conflict of interest. So I don't know if that expense is really worth it if we have a qualified HR person who can direct around those issues. And if you need to use an outside counsel in those areas, that's the way to go.
That's
But
basically
yeah,
this is,
the conflict of interest on personnel issues, they pop up pretty quickly.
the HR consultant, that 13,000 would handle most everything that's related to HR issues that we want to deal with. There will be times when we'll need legal counsel.
Exactly.
So,
Exactly.
and that's how I've historically dealt with it.
That's
I've
how
always
I would
had,
do it.
I've had somebody on staff that does most of the HR things, handles the 401K and the payroll and all that. And then when there are issues that come up, on termination or harassment or anything like that, then legal counsel gets involved.
Right. I mean, you gotta weigh it. You gotta weigh it. That's,
Right.
right now, it's probably the best way, is the way he has it. The main thing is the money's in the budget for it. He recommended it, they put it in. Same thing with, obviously, the lawyer's in there. Point was made today. I mean, obviously, you gotta find the right person or whatever. It's always something to review. I mean, if you can find the right person, and it's something that should be looked at. Here's what it's costing us to go outside 100% of the time. If we had somebody here, obviously, that person will probably have to go outside at times. Come on, it's.
Yeah. One of the things
I
about
mean, you have
legal
to weigh
is
that based upon
looking
the
at.
budget and what you
the-
need.
One of the things that we've been discussing is, on the legal side of things, there are multiple specialities, shall we say? There's HOA law, there's having local knowledge in the local court system. I've shared with others the story from Lake of the Woods, that the main guy that worked with Boise Cascade on crafting all the governing documents for that sister community was Atwell Somerville, and this was the legal counsel for the association, and his brother was the judge. And so that came in pretty handy when you're dealing with things. But, so there are local connections and influences, and relationships is the word I'm looking for. And then there's, HOA law is very specific. And then personnel law is even more specific. Large HOA legal firms have that full house to deal with all of those things. So it's a balance of utilizing multiple law firms, and I think that's where the board's directive is. Let's utilize all of our different assets and our specialities that we can bring to
That's
the
what you
table.
should do.
And that's what most companies do.
Yeah.
And understanding all that, it's befuddled me why we had a firm up in Silver Spring, Maryland, dealing with our issues down here, and an auditing firm out of Pennsylvania dealing with our issues too. I think
No,
local
the
is
auditing firm
probably
is
better.
from Baltimore.
Or Baltimore.
Same point, I know your point.
Yeah.
Well,
Or food and beverage from California.
Right,
oh my God.
absolutely.
Sorry.
All right, all right. Okay, so I think we're good on that. So the recommendation here is obviously there's money in the budget for it. How he does it,
We don't need a
GM, that's up to the
recommendation. He's already got
GM.
it.
The best way, obviously, if it's out of whack, then we come back with something like that. Just one point on that. When you have change, any organization that has change, I don't want to say the word chaos, anytime you have change, you better have the HR and other support that you need to handle that. That's an inherent cost. And if you don't have it, and you don't have the job descriptions, you don't have the procedures, the controls, you change systems, you change point of sale, that's a lot of them. So hopefully we're past all that.
In the GM portion of the department, if you would, the big changes are a little bit of change on the payroll side and the big jump is the 13,000 for the HR consultant.
And that's enough, John? 13.
I think so.
Good question, that's the question. Good question.
Well, I mean,
Yeah.
obviously.
I think so. I mean, we,
Yeah.
most of it is administrative unless you have a problem. And I don't see that being a 40-hour-a-week need here at Ocean Pines.
Not if you've carved out all the job descriptions and so forth.
Right,
Being done by somebody else.
that part is this additional over these next few months. That will be a more intensive time frame and work to be done. After that's done, then it's managing the process.
Yeah, I think you're comfortable, you have the resources to do that and maintain that, I guess.
Yeah,
But with this,
okay. All right, we're all done on that. We'll move on to finance. Questions, line by line?
and to point out the net operating there is reduced another $30,000 from budget, and from forecast about 55,000?
It's about right. 50,
Forecast?
54, 55, yes.
So the budget's not devoid of deductions.
Most contract services.
There could be more, okay, I'm willing to give you that, but it's not devoid of it.
All right, somebody had a question or whatever? Did I hear somebody over there have a question? I have
You
a
know,
couple.
associate dues, we just eliminated that. We didn't have any of those, or we did this year, but you'll see that difference in the associate fees back in the fee structure.
That's getting rid of that card
That's
concept.
getting rid of you pay $250 and then you're a member, and then you can pay member fees. We got rid of that. So that comes out of this line item, and you'll see it in the associate fees under the different amenities.
Okay. The question I have on this is the overtime. Not a big number, but it is a number. You take last year out of the equation and you go back, even though it's less than what this forecast is coming in for this year, it's more than what historically has happened back there. Again, going back to what I said, when you have change, when you have the change that we had last year, and change sometimes is good, I'm not saying change is whatever, but you're gonna have overtime. I don't think we have that change now. Was that considered in calculating this overtime number, or do we feel we need it? Because just thinking in my head of the things that caused it, that is all settled down or whatever, or is gonna be addressed, why would we still need that overtime?
I don't think that number can go down.
It could go down.
Yeah.
Okay, so that could go
You
down,
want to recommend?
yeah. Yeah, yeah.
I'll just say, I'm.
Don't go
flat-
crazy,
flat-
I'm just-
No, that's all right, I flat missed that one.
It's fine,
'Cause
I believe you.
You'll see in other overtime slots,
It's
I
fine.
slashed
It's fine. But if there's a
considerably,
reason why
probably
you
maybe
need it
too
or
low in some
whatever,
places.
that's fine.
But
JB, if you don't know-
overtime is sort of out of control, and I'm trying to rein that in.
Has it come in, things seem to have calmed down. the
It's
last couple
calmed
of
down
months.
quite a bit.
Now,
I
also, we're
mean,
not,
just for everybody's knowledge, I meet with the department heads every 2 weeks, and we do a roundtable thing, and as well as I share some different things, and we do some management stuff sometimes. And September, I think, soon after I started. It's rein in the overtime, folks. It's like, it's pretty simple. I mean, there are emergencies, well, case in point, this past week. Obviously, there was gonna be a lot of overtime in Public Works. That's okay.
But you can explain it.
That's
It's
explainable. But a lot of overtime wasn't explainable, and we're we've really sort of ratcheted that back over the last 2 or 3 months.
Good.
A low-hanging
Excellent.
fruit.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, and so, Art and I went around about on, what was it, Yacht Club overtime, I think I zeroed it. It's like, it was sending a message that, stop it. There's no really reason to have that. There will be some, I mean, but if you budget for a lot of overtime, you're gonna get a lot of overtime. That's the expectation.
Right. And that all comes in under, in September, we recommend accountability, who's accountable for this, who is calling people in, making them accountable for their budgets.
So,
Very
yeah,
important. And it seems like you're doing it.
The phrase, if you lower the
You're doing
bar of expectations, people will meet it every time, yeah.
it. So it sounds like you're doing it.
Are you
Okay.
leaving the approval process for overtime to the managers, or
To
they need to come to
the
you?
department heads, yeah,
Marty.
they own it. So
And
that-
I like to keep the record straight. The reduction you just mentioned is really a reduction of budget against budget. I don't do budget against budget. I don't.
Well, which line item are you talking about?
I assume you were talking about payroll.
Well, we're talking about the overtime, but I
Overtime,
did put it to actual. I
overtime,
put
Marty.
it, I put it to 2 years ago. I did put it to actual.
It-
Actually,
it-
several years.
Line 435, account 435.
Yeah, that one's up over budget, yes.
Right. We weren't comparing it
No,
budget
no,
to
I'm not
budget.
talking, I'm talking the whole thing, the whole enchilada.
For
The total
finance and
payroll?
membership.
I'm talking about your total payroll.
He's absorbed a whole new department.
But it's really it's an increase to forecast. It's a reduction to budget. There's no sense looking at the 17 budget, because we all know how bad that one was.
That's my point.
That's
So
what we-
when
that's
you
what we did.
compare it to forecast, it's actually increased. And I
The
guess.
payroll, yes.
My question is, payroll since 15, which wasn't all that long ago, is up 188,654, 43%. Do we put more people in that department? I mean, what jumped at 43% in 3 years? And if you don't know, I understand you're new.
I think
I can,
the chairman
I
knows.
can, I can actually.
And by the way, if you take that 188 and follow it to the bottom of the page to net operations, bingo, your entire net operation increase in loss is almost the exact same number.
Right. So to answer your question, I mean, I can answer it, and then anybody wants to join in. So there was an increase to staff. There was an increase in salaries to certain positions. That's a big part of the payroll increase. There was increase to staff. When we look at the FTE schedules, which I was doing yesterday, I think the number was actually 2.3 or something like that. Don't hold me to that, but we'll check that. There was an increase in staff, which we addressed yesterday, and I spoke to JB about. And there was an increase in salaries for certain positions. We're paying, again, talk in general, we are paying more for certain positions than we did in the past.
Cool. I'm just-
Yeah, and I'm
It just
asking.
leaps off the page at me. 'Cause
No, and you're right, but that's what it is. There was decisions made last year, and it's showing up on that page. Anybody else have any questions first?
Yeah, I do.
Hold on. I just want to make sure at the table. Anybody else have anything on that? Oh, yeah, look, I believe me, I'll
No,
take
no, I
questions,
just-
hold on, no, just let me just say this, so I'm gonna take questions, I'm fine with it, I'm open to this. I just gotta make sure I keep it going, so please keep it relative to everything.
It will
And
be
it's not for you,
relative
it's
to
for
this.
anybody. Believe me, I'll answer any questions, just,
I just want to ask Mr. Chairman to clarify whether those salaries increases you're referring to from last year were board approved or not. You can go on record, please.
where are you going for, Mike? You're asking me to comment on something that I was not there for. I'm not on the board. I did not, wasn't on the board, so I can't answer that question. That's something that has to be answered at the board. I understand why you're asking it, That's gotta be at the board. I don't know what the board did, to be honest with you. I don't know. I mean, I understand your question, I
Need to
do.
make sure the membership is aware, what board you didn't know.
That you have to, you gotta talk at the board. I
Thank
mean,
you,
I'll
Mr.
talk for this committee. This committee is in lockstep with anything we do. We disagree on some things, we work it out as a team, and we go forward with that. And that's what I've seen, and that's what we all expect on you.
Wow.
You gotta do the same. Okay,
Wait, let's not leave this a minute, if we
you still
may.
wanna stay here?
Okay. I'm having a hard time reading this upside down.
You on the FTE schedule? Hold on, let's make sure we all get there. Marty's gonna have a question, he's got it on the FTE schedule. Marty, what number was that?
What's the page number there, Marty?
1.3.
Thank you.
1.3, you got
1.3.
9.4 total employees. That's what that reads, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong.
All right, so hold on, so Marty,
Right.
you're looking at
Seven
finance?
full and 2 part.
Let me make sure I'm doing my math right.
Oh, yeah.
He's at 1.3?
He's on finance?
Yeah, he's on finance.
9.3, 9.4.
Finance membership.
So.
Okay, so that actually ties into what I said, like 2 point something
Divide
increase.
that into total payroll and tell me that the average income in our finance department, $65,800.
You're asking me?
Yeah.
Sitting here now, I would say, I'm not gonna say it's lower.
But
But
it
how
isn't
much
lower
of-
if you do it by budget.
How much,
No,
how much is,
I'm
how much
saying
are benefits
that's
factored
possible.
into that too? That's
Total-
not
it's
total
total
payroll.
It's way
All
more
right,
than
so, so total payroll would be the salary plus benefits.
Yeah, but people don't get a check at the end of the week based on, it's the whole thing. I mean, it's what it costs us.
Well, I understand that, Marty, but if your question was, are we paying an average salary, excuse me, of $65,000, you've
Probably
got to,
yes.
it's less than that, because you got to back out the benefits.
No, he's going pure. I think that's without
Are
the
you going
benefits.
pure?
Let me,
Now, this is with
all right, let me answer this, because this,
That's with
first of
benefits.
all, we're doing the budget for 2019. A lot of this is for the prior year. Maybe some of it wasn't in the budget or whatever. It happened, it's in the forecast for the, let me mix up my years, for the 17-18 year. We're reviewing the budget today for 19. Those increases are not coming through in 19. They happen in 18. Should they be addressed in this budget? I would say yes, but again, this happened in the prior year. I am right now looking at it, it was over 2. If we go back to the year before, the fiscal that we're in right now, we did have an increase in finance of somewhere like 2.5, 2.8, so I was right on that. There were increases in salary in finance last year, yes. He's not bumping up salaries that much with this budget from what I've seen so far, but that is something that would have to be addressed.
You're taking a total number of employees in finance. What are you dividing that into, which line item?
618, 977.
Total, that's the total payroll.
Total payroll.
But that includes,
I got it. But that's what it costs
So then
us.
go to
and
the
that's
other
not
line,
people-
go to the other line, it
you
just
can't
gives you
say they're
salary.
being paid 69,000.
They are too. That's what they cost us.
Change your word, just say total cost of the,
Total
of the
cost of
finance
payroll.
person.
Let's do the other one.
Total cost of a finance.
429, 230.
Marty, they're not getting paid 618,000.
He's saying total cost for a person in
Okay,
finance.
here's your total payroll, not including health benefits
What
or
line item, what
unemployment.
line item are you looking at?
It's the first one, 429, 239.
420?
No, yes, 420.
420.
I don't do accountant talk, I'm sorry.
What 20?
That's 45.6. I'm assuming out of those 9 people, we have some clerks and typists and
I don't know about the typist one.
what?
Plus, we got 40% payroll costs.
That ain't 69,000 person.
No, you said a different number.
That's
Well, 30%.
47,000.
No, I don't know what that percentage is.
170 over 429, that's 39%.
That seems high to me. But either one of these numbers, even if you use the first one, 45.6 just seems, it's just putting it on the table. We
Yeah.
need a book that says
You have it.
what people are paying for that.
You're saying, I'm not gonna disagree, I don't have the math in front of me, you're saying that a cost of a finance person, all in, is somewhere around 65, 70,000, I got it.
Or 45. if
We
you don't
increased
include
that
benefits.
staff, Ocean Pines increased that staff last year, not in this budget, last year's actual, I don't know if some of it was in the budget or not, at this point. We did, they did.
That will be addressed when
Well,
he
it's-
looks at all the salary and the salary ranges when he set that.
Hold on, let me just get this. Go ahead.
Not including the benefits, straight pay. What are they getting paid?
Just pure salary,
There are 2 above 50,000.
okay?
Everybody else is less than that.
Right.
But the average is 45, unless your budget's wrong, or your number, or your
The,
page.
the average may be that, I'm just telling you that there are 2 above 50 and the rest are below 45.
Right. Sounds right. The question, no, what? What
Doesn't
else are you
sound
gonna
right
say?
to me. I mean, it sounds high.
Well, that's a different story. What I'm saying is, that sounds like what's happening. Now,
I'll
whether or
agree
not
with
you
that.
wanna comment on we're paying too much, that's another question. And if that's what you are, that's fine, that you're right, but, it sounds to me what he's saying is happening, or what's in there, it sounds right to me, just quick and dirty. Now, whether or not you agree with what we should be paying, that's a different story. I'm just trying to say to you, it's not in the, you do have an increase in staff that I think needs to be looked at, though, to be
But
honest
not,
with you.
this year it's a very slight
I said
0.8.
that, I said in this year's budget, it's not, but it happened last year.
Yeah, sure.
It's probably a good time to mention that, when we get to the end of this thing too, Marty, on salaries, that, we've got some recommendations on
Right.
increases and benefits
Right.
that are gonna affect all these
Right.
numbers too, so,
Yeah, this department's got an $84,000 increase.
right now.
Yeah.
Okay. This is all part of it. The Budget and Finance Committee, just for everybody, has looked at the overall payroll and payroll costs, and I know they're gonna have comments, recommendations, guidance on what they've seen. Okay, I made the point on this one. Anything else on finance before we move on? I think that's it, right? Arts, I just want, I don't know, I want to know where, how, what, what's in this, arts, fees or whatever is in the finance or somewhere else? Okay, that's all I'm gonna. Okay, good. I'm moving on, and everybody with me, or any other questions? I'm sorry?
No,
You
We got deficit
Deficit
recovery.
recovery as a general topic, it's not
Doesn't-
not a tab there.
No, I meant with the finance, I meant with the finance department purely. Everybody's good with the finance department?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, so then going to the agenda. Admin, GM, finance, and what John O'Connor's pointing out is now we're up to deficit recovery.
So are we still calling this admin? Or finance, I mean? Or we jump somewhere else?
As
There's
far as,
no tab
as
for
as
the
far
next
as the,
No
yeah,
tab
there's
for
no
the
tab.
next
As far as the
tab.
agenda, we're still on the 9:15, admin, GM, finance, and deficit recovery.
Quick question,
We're actually on target.
you got this, we're in 04 finance, and I should have mentioned this earlier. It may not have been in last year's book, I wasn't as involved last year, but, and you weren't here at all. Maybe Art could help. What happened to the membership tab?
We combine finance.
Combined finance and membership.
Got it.
It's the same group.
And how do we track that going back? Let me tell you what a pain it was doing the payroll spreadsheet. I mean, I almost
Yeah.
hung
We just
myself.
added them together.
Okay, now, if somebody wanted to compare the cost of amenities,
All right, we'll talk about it. You want to talk about that? Do you want
I
to
mean,
talk about
that department's
Where is
amenities
that? That's
driven
behind
department,
finance, the membership? All right,
right?
all right, let me bring it up.
They process the.
Let me ask.
Yeah.
Yeah, all right, all right.
Why did we do that?
They process the membership, but it's not,
So it's fourth-
broken out
same
by,
fourth-
to the
fourth
particular
product.
amenities.
We can add that into the cost of the
Right, well,
amenities.
that's what he's pointing out.
Why?
Well,
Because it's a cost of an amenity.
that's one way to look at it.
But here's my question is,
To me, it's it's administrative cost of what we do.
what was the reason behind combining it into finance?
Who do they report to?
I don't have a clue.
Finance.
They report to
Finance.
that's why you did.
They
I told
report
you
to
that yesterday.
finance.
That
It's
was
a
my guess.
restructuring based upon how we actually do our jobs.
That was my guess yesterday, that's why.
Well, we've had a membership tab since I've been here, but
Yeah.
and that's going back about 35 years, isn't it?
For purposes of this book,
Well, we have a tab for pickleball and platform tennis and tennis too.
did you combine
It's called
these
racket sports,
historically?
perfect.
I would agree with that.
So here's what happened with something like this, just in
On the
general.
book, were these combined historically? Did you go back to combine 2015, 16,
Yes.
17?
Yes.
Yes.
All right, so these are combined with the
The number-
membership
the-
and finance,
The
okay.
numbers were right once you know the code.
And, you know, like when we get over to golf, you've got the shop, you've got maintenance, and you got turn.
Right.
You know, and, you know, right now, they're broken out so you can at least keep track of them, but there needs to be, and that's what we did this year, was to have a summary page of, here's what golf relates
Used to be
back to.
4 tabs.
So,
I mean, it used to be country club, whatever they called this room at the time,
Maintenance?
maintenance and
Yeah.
golf.
so what did golf cost us? You gotta put them all together.
Yeah.
And that's where we're going.
That's the transparency.
Just for going forward, and I heard the pickleball, the racquetball, that combined, just so down the road or whatever, when something becomes bigger, or the numbers become bigger, if in the past we combined them, because they were small, let's break them out so we can then see it. That's just simple, whatever, or whatever.
Yeah, I don't mind a bigger book and more
I
tabs.
mean, you know, I understand why you're looking at it, Marty, but, you know, because of the detail you know. Okay, on finance behind it now, because memberships is part of finance, Gene pointed out to me, your schedules 4.3 to 4.7. Does anybody have any questions on that? That's all about the membership. Were there any changes made on how, like last year, that was another thing, there was a lot of changes made to the memberships, the golf packages, what was combined with what. Did anything?
This is where your associate's fee is showing up now, right?
Correct.
Instead
And
of-
I would say do those as you get to each amenity if you want
But
to
that's
look at
fine.
those fees.
But in general, overall, was there changes, or there wasn't changes, just?
There were some change, some had changes based upon marketplace, and some were left alone.
But not radical like Wish?
No.
Okay, that's fine.
I had one comment on the fees, and I know Bob and I talked a little bit about it yesterday. On the individual golf fee, you know, we reduced that number, $115, with the hopes of attracting new members. I don't know that had any effect. We did get some net increase to golf last year. I think that, you know, my recommendation is that we move that number back to $1,300. It's an individual thing, but I don't, you know, I just don't, I don't see that the reduction of $115 was any incentive to get anybody else out there. The reality of it is, the people that are joining this club are people that move down here generally on a full-time basis, and they're gonna go ahead and stay, and they're gonna wanna play. And I'm an example of that last year. I finally was able to, you know, become a full-time resident here, and for 30 years, I've been waiting to join the club. So, Bob, unless you, I mean, that's my opinion. I think this is one area we could probably increase revenue a little bit.
I disagree.
Well, Mr. Chairman,
Yeah.
while we relate-
I go with Bob.
weigh these fees when we have those discussions about those different amenities.
Yeah, I agree with that.
'Cause that's
Okay, that's fine.
when
I got a lot of
those
questions
department
when we get
heads will
to
be involved in that.
Okay.
And
That's fine.
any committee
Totally
members who
agree.
are interested in those things.
Absolutely.
Will be part of
That's
that,
fine.
can be
Okay.
present for that.
I just want to make a comment on it in general, because I won't get into the detail, we'll do it in those different items. We lowered it, whatever. I would think with anything, with payroll benefits, with golf fees or whatever, that we are going out and looking at what our competition is paying or not paying or whatever. I would hope that that comes into it somewhere to be competitive, as opposed to certain, I'm not disagreeing with him that we lowered it, but the same people probably would have played for the same price. I'm not disagreeing on that. But the question would be then, is we lowered it, did we get more members for that cost? And where is that competition with the other golf courses. That to me would be.
Right, where does it place us in the strata?
Right.
So that's my,
Is
that
a
would be my
big- Is a
question.
big factor about how people view
And
a
that's
course or
applicable
anything
to every
else.
amenity in Ocean Pines.
Absolutely,
Right, exactly,
yeah.
exactly. Okay, all right, so we'll respect that, we'll do that on each,
Back
Department amenity,
to deficit recovery.
oh yeah, deficit recovery.
I had, it was on the last page, or page 8 of the executive summary. That's really where you see this as far as any explanation to it. A plan for dealing with the deficit was called for in the budget guidance. There are, and I'll state this, that there are ways to accelerate that deficit recovery. One of the things that we're looking at, and it's already been spoken out loud, I think, and that's looking at selling some of the properties that we have. We started that process a number of years ago, and then it just sort of died. I think the market went away at that time, and so I've got that list, and we'll be working on pursuing that. But that's speculative. I mean, you know, what number is that gonna be? You know, when would it occur and whatnot? I didn't wanna try and speculate that into the budget. Given the fact that we had done this type of process before for recovery, obviously it wasn't an unknown concept to the association and the membership itself. And so we took the 1.4 and divided it by the number of lots, so 452, and did it over 5 years versus 3 or 2 or 1 to avoid, you know, some huge increase. So that's how that number came about. As we proceed to, you know, if I could sell lots in the next 30 days, okay, then we can adjust that. I don't think that's gonna happen, but there are other methods that we talked, the committee talked about a little bit yesterday, to get at this. So,
They'll bring it up.
I put a plan together, that wasn't an unknown concept, to everybody, and that dealt with it, in a non-speculative manner. And there are other ways to get at it, so.
So, with that said, when I saw that, I totally respected, you addressed it in a logical way. You came up with proactive ideas about selling lots, could work. We'll also hear from some of the Budget and Finance Committee members when we get to the different amenities or whatever, bulkheads, they have some ideas too on how to save money, which are all good. The point I'm gonna make on that is, and definitely let's look for that and let's do it. The point is somewhere we have a situation that needs to be addressed, whether it's cost or whatever. And we need to address that, because if we just keep putting these Band-Aids on it, and we're not a real estate investment trust, we're gonna start selling off properties, which we should do though. We can't do that every year. We have
No,
to
that's a
address the
one-shot
cost. Yeah,
deal.
and I totally respect it, and I was, when you said it, I was like, wow. And I know you asked me some questions on the accounting for it and all that, but definitely, but I'm just saying, this team has analyzed it, it will come out over the next 3 days, but we do have to address where it's a static, in a situation where revenues or whatever is here, but every year our costs seem to be just, well, they are going up, and somewhere it has to be addressed. And I believe this committee is gonna address it.
I think what he's saying is, we're doing a great job bailing out the boat, but nobody's fixing the hole.
There you go. There you go. That's why he's sitting here. Question?
JB mentioned selling lots. You talking about the individual lots that Ocean Pines Association owns?
Yes, sir.
I'm not sure if you're aware of it or not, but over a period of 5 years or more, at least probably 2 general managers, we made extreme pushes to try to sell them. Extreme pushes. I don't think we sold one lot. So I
Extreme
wouldn't count
pushes,
on that too much to be a source of revenue.
extreme pushes at $150,000 in an $80,000 market, find extreme pushes.
Anyway, it wasn't very successful.
Anything will sell if it's at the right price.
Exactly.
Yeah, timing's everything.
And timing, right. Okay.
Well,
But
to Marty's analogy about the hole in the boat, I'd say there's 5 holes in the boat, and we plugged 3 or 4 of them. How about that?
Not enough.
I didn't say that.
He's only been here 4 months. He's only been here 3 or 4 months.
I think
Tired of
that,
bailing.
I think the discussions we had too, for the associate members who are watching and the board members here is that the look of another 5-year program, is not great. And, I think that, my personal preference, and I know that everybody has their own opinion, but I think somehow we need to accelerate that in addition to trying to solve the problem. I think we're on the way to solving them, but I think the recovery of this money, we just, we can't go back. I don't believe we can go back to another 5-year plan, and then 3 years from now, when we have a new board or other people involved, and that money all of a sudden shows up in operations, or it's not being used the way it's supposed to be used, or it's in a budget that the general manager decides, well, we can shift this money over here and use it to do this or do that. I think that's what has gotten us into the situation we've been in the past.
I don't think that's happened in the past. I don't think any deficit recovery money was used for anything other than deficit recovery.
Yeah, I believe that.
And I don't believe that any of that money was used for any other purpose. If we're gonna try recovery, you can't put it all in one budget, I don't think, because then the assessments might be about $100,000 a person. We don't wanna do that. So I spread it, I'm just kidding about the $100,000. We're spreading it over 5 years. That gives this organization an opportunity to turn this boat around. And if this boat turns around and starts making a profit, there's nothing against making a profit, even though we're nonprofit, because you gotta build up your operating. Your operating fund's the only fund that's not dedicated. It's unrestricted funds, the operating funds. You can use it for whatever you want. If we can turn the boat around, start making some profits, then we could not have to collect that $33 maybe in the 4th year or the 5th year. So I think it's a reasonable plan, and even though the homeowners may say, I don't like the taste of this right now, but we can, with the brilliance on this committee, except for me, and on the board currently, I think we can try to get down into the operations and make this more profitable.
I would change one word from if to as we do
What?
so. Instead of if
As we turn it
if we
around.
turn it around, it's as we turn it around.
As we turn it around, okay,
Well
that's
said.
even more positive.
Well said.
Yep. I mentioned this yesterday, and I want to say it again. That's how we show that in our accounting. We show
Okay.
that fund in what's labeled at the top, Ocean Pines Association Reserves. And we've done this before, and every time we transfer money over, or I'd mention it, where's that money? People thought we were taking money out of reserves and putting it into operations. We shouldn't. I would put this as far away from a reserve category as I could. I mean, it doesn't matter, other than, it does say this is Ocean Pines Reserves, and anybody that's watching doesn't want to hear that we move anything out of reserves into operations. I mean, we do, every dollar gets moved into operations for some reason to get spent.
But it does not say it's a replacement reserve. You can create a reserve according to our bylaws,
Agreed, and here it is.
and you can create a reserve for whatever the board wants, as long as it's defined what it's for. And it does not mean that was for replacement and being put in operations. That column.
Deficit recovery.
The deficit recovery.
Deficit
I mean,
recovery
if everybody
fund
else is
is a
comfortable
separate
with
piece
it
from
being here,
reserves.
I'm
Do it that way.
okay with it. I just thought it would be nice if you didn't
Well,
make it so
Label it
close.
a reserve, and
It's not-
maybe it's a separate page that has different recovery fund.
Yeah,
that's a definitional problem or education problem for us to get to the membership.
Great.
But it's
That's-
not a
that's
philosophical
process.
problem.
Okay.
Do we have any recommendations under this category?
On the operating deficit recovery fund?
Yes.
Anybody? I heard it, I mean, what were you
My
saying? Were you saying
recommendation,
that,
well, my recommendation to the committee is that we accelerate this to 3 years.
it's $142 of assessment if you do it in one. That'll
and
get,
and
and
that's
that'll,
why I didn't put it on the table.
and that'll get the hole in the boat fixed overnight.
Is that what you
I'm not
recommend?
sure that won't create more
No.
holes
Hold on.
from the constituency.
Not paying, you mean?
I don't,
Not so much not paying, but just, that smells of a PR problem, real PR problem.
Any increase in an assessment is a PR problem.
I agree, Marty, but there's big PR problems and there's manageable small problems.
I'm not recommending we pay it all in one lump.
Well, a
I'm just saying you
suggestion,
could.
as we go through this, at the end of this, we are gonna be looking at reductions in expenses, at least that's a lot of we're gonna put on. So why don't we wait until we get to the end of our analysis and see if we can reduce expenses more, and maybe we could increase the recovery more than over 5 years. But I agree, I mean, the term 5-year plan doesn't,
Has
sell
a
well to
historical
anybody.
connotation that doesn't look well.
Because the last 5-year plan went on for at least 8, if not more.
How
That's
about we
still in
call
there.
it a
Yeah, but that's a
4 or
manageable-
It's
6
still in
year
there. It's still in there. I'm not gonna get into
No,
that.
it's
I think,
problem.
I think John has a very good point. Let's put it off to the end. Let's see how it goes.
Defer.
It's, we understand what Larry's point is, and that's good. And we'll address it at the end. Good. Okay. Question?
Given that we now have JB here, we all have this very high confidence level. We have this very high confidence level in our board of directors at this point. I believe that recommendation should be not to collect a nickel of it because we're so confident that JB and this board over the next few years is going to recover those funds.
Interesting.
JB, I'd start ducking if I were you.
I did.
Interesting. No, interesting. Hold on,
He did
please.
duck.
Hold on, Joe's not done. I mean, interesting. Interesting.
He
Yeah,
just
but-
expressed his confidence that we're on the road to recovery, so let's take him at his word.
Actually, that's the way we did it up until 2009.
And where that
There's
gets,
recovery to balance. I'm not gonna say we're gonna make $500,000 profit every year.
No.
We're not,
You don't have to, 3 years.
Look, if this was my business, I would not be sitting back saying, well, I think we're gonna do good 3, 4, 5 years from now. You can't run a business that way. If we have these deficits now, we have to address it, with all due respect.
so you're saying give him a clean slate and let him start from there?
No, I'm saying that we need to address this deficit.
Yeah, I agree.
And-
So
and
which, give
I go
him
back
this
to
so it's a
my
clean
opening
slate.
comment. That's the whole premise,
Right.
is how do we deal with the 1.4 sitting over here? And how do we start correcting a
I'm
broken
saying the same
budget?
thing as you.
Oh, I'm sorry,
And
yeah.
I think we've started that, and maybe we can accelerate that, and that's part of these conversations here and in a couple of weeks
Yeah.
with the board, is to how can we accelerate that a little bit further?
I'm more concerned about how do we stop the leak. I
Well,
mean,
that's what I'm
we can
saying.
address it
That's what
as
I'm
the
saying.
3 days, as the 3 days.
2009, we decided to address a deficit that had been carried on the books. So we initiated the Ocean Ponds OP Recovery Fund, whatever it was,
Okay.
over a 5-year period that became 8.
All right.
So we gathered up all that money, we paid back more than the 500,000, we still have a giant deficit. More than the 500 we started with.
And that's-
Yeah, but what does that
that's
tell
this
you,
year's
Boyd?
budget.
we
What
had
is that?
other big deficit problems, the IRS tax.
That's one example, that
That
didn't
was
help.
$400,000 worth of an example.
Didn't help, that's one example.
So, revenue's here, it's static, costs keep going up every year. We talked about it, I believe, over this 3 days, based upon what we all talked about yesterday, that this committee has a plan and has some items to recommend to try to get that cost kind of in line. I know I had a question over there. I'm just watching for the 11 o'clock, I got 15 minutes, so anybody want to ask questions, go ahead.
Understanding the concern about public relations, with regard to any change in the assessment dollars, and also the notion of, the previous connotation of a 5-year plan and the impact that's had, the perception that's had in the community. Would consideration be given for potentially saying a 3-year plan with an option for, additional years based on the state of the, recovery fund at that point in time, to kind of lessen the blow? In other words, not committing totally to a 5-year, but committing to a review after a certain period. Maybe it's only 2 years with optional 1 year, 1 year, additions based on the condition of the recovery plan.
So that's almost like a hybrid of the two recommendations that I made. That's
And
definitely
now-
a point.
Amy later.
That would be my recommendation.
Yeah, that's a
You look
point.
at it on a year-to-year basis. He's got a good plan to start. Well, I mean,
Right.
we need to get the boat, as Marty refers to, moving.
Right,
That starts it. Every year, next year, this time, you take a look at it.
okay. We'll definitely make a recommendation. That's good feedback. I'm glad we're opening up to the audience and all that. John's gonna definitely write all that down. Okay. Okay, so I'm just checking the time. I know we have at 11 o'clock public relations coming in.
Just a break.
I think we're good, right? Finance, whatever, the membership's all done. Everybody's good at this point. We can take a break, or any other questions, I'm open to them as long as I'm staying on my timeline. Okay. A few minutes. JB, you got somebody coming in at 11, is that right?
Yeah.
Okay, just give me some feedback on how the first 2 hours went, guys. Just give me some feedback on how that first 2 hours. I'm always up, I'm always asking you guys.
You're gonna have stuff that's kind of out there, but that just goes with it.
I think it's gone well. JB, how were you on the 2 hours? Good?
What's that?
How did it go the first 2 hours on your end?
I asked
You comfortable with the process?
I am. Are you guys comfortable with what, John?
1 second.
I am.
What I'm doing and,
Yeah, I think it's fine.
okay.
I think you could have done it.
Oh, we don't have the.
I need to know, first time in I've done the rodeos before, but I'm first time in this venue, so.
Well, you hadn't been bucked off the horse yet, so you're doing good.
You know, like you're sitting here with retired bankers and CPAs and everything, you don't see anybody with a tie and jacket.
We went from 21 to 81.
The new dress code, Jason.
No.
ladies
All
and
right.
gentlemen, sit down.
Start slapping people.
What's the market doing? Do I gotta come back? Okay, so now on the agenda for 11 a.m., Public Relations and Marketing. Everybody please have a seat.
Denise is gonna join us.
Denise is gonna, oh, great.
Oh, hello, hello.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Add a female to the element.
You always need a good sound-mind woman.
Every table needs some class.
We just upped the IQ.
We had
Well-
a IQ before that.
The other day, Marty was outside and he said to me, "Good morning, sunshine," to which I responded, "Good morning, beautiful." And I'll tell the story on Denise. I was following her in, happened to pull in the parking lot behind her, and she was finishing her makeup. So I called her beautiful yesterday morning too. But that was the reason why.
Where's that HR person we were looking
I
at?
know, there you go.
Let's get back to that, yeah.
Isn't that a shame? We have to say, uh-oh.
Okay. All right, so let's see what tab we're up to. Public Relations and Marketing, which is 5, thank you. Okay. Anybody want to start? So Denise, especially what the committee does is they go line by line, see wherever they see variations and ask questions on that. Everything's pretty much gone through JB, but that's up to him or you, and whoever responds, it's fine. Okay, so anybody have questions on Public Relations and Marketing?
Well, let me, I'd like to jump to 5.3, and we talked about this stuff yesterday. The $3,500, I'm sorry, the $3,100 for the trolley. I just see no benefit in $3,100 on that trolley, and, you guys, you can address that. Yeah.
That was just one comment, that was the trade-off with short transit for for them doing a stop at the yacht club.
And again, I see no benefit to that. I don't ever see anybody on that trolley when I see it, unless somebody can correct me that we're getting that
Never
kind
seen a
of value.
person on it except the driver.
Right.
Can I just ask, because I've seen that, what does the trolley do? Because I've seen it, and I agree, I've never seen anybody on it. But what
What's the
exactly
whole
does it do?
trolley route?
That's a great question. So I think it goes more past just the commuters, but it serves as a moving billboard.
Well, it goes from the commuter lot, let me interrupt, it goes from the commuter lot, if I understand it, to various spots in Berlin, comes
Primarily
here.
Ocean Downs.
Yeah, and then, it has a loop that they make, and it makes a stop, at the yacht club?
No, but I know that was at request of one of our committees, if we can look into having a yacht club stop in order to maybe introduce more exposure to that amenity, hoping that more folks would
Right.
actually attend events that are happening there if they're looking to partake in adult beverages and not want to have to drive home. It's a great alternative, but it does serve.
That was the premise behind it.
Yes.
We want to cut it, okay, that's fine.
But it's not stopping at the yacht club.
No, it will. We've gotten that agreement with Shore Transit that if we were to come on board as a client with marketing, that they would change and modify their route to include a stop at the yacht club.
My own opinion is I don't think it's worth it. It's a small amount of money, but $3,100 is $3,100.
Okay.
And then, and let me move on to the publications.
Going to the marketing brochures, the
Yeah,
catering.
well, I'm sorry, the television, I have to, and I mentioned this to JB yesterday, I'm not sure what we're trying to accomplish by, spending this kind of money on television to advertise Ocean Pines. And I have to admit, last night I forgot what I was watching, but twice the ad came on for Ocean Pines, which was beautifully done, it was very nice. But I'm not so sure someone has to explain to me what the value is of advertising Ocean Pines as a community outside of here. I just don't know what the value is marketing wise. What we're trying to do is Are we trying to get people to use the amenities, or, which really hasn't worked? Or are we trying to get people to move down here? And I don't think, my own opinion is, I don't know that this kind of money helps that. But that's just my observation. I don't know what the answer is.
Your observation, I think, is correct, that it's partly to draw people in to utilize and garner some revenue from. It's also partly to market the general community in and of itself as being, you need to look at this. If you're looking to locate in this area, you need to consider Ocean Pines. It may not say it that way, but that's the part of the purpose behind that type of advertising. Some communities don't do this at all.
Right.
And then, you know, we may want to look at some other things that I'm not familiar enough with it yet, but Home and Garden magazine and some other things like that, I know that Lake of the Woods had done Southern Living, a big promo in there. Those are actually more expensive than what we're looking at here. But that's the purpose behind that type of funding.
But the question is then, is what do we get for it? Are we really getting anything for it? And that's the question.
Right,
that I really
I think your piece on the amenities may is still to be determined, I guess, or lack thereof. I think the issue of, is it gonna, how do you determine that return on investment for general marketing piece? That one's harder to get at.
It is hard to quantify the results, and I think the objective of the spot, the advertising spot, is subjective to that amenity. The ad that you saw last night is just announcing that we're celebrating 50 years of excellence. It's not selling our amenities, it's branding the community. During a time of which we've had some very contentious talks of our community, it's vital that we not only market our amenity, but rebrand it as a place that's approachable, that's welcoming and inclusive. Because a lot of folks think that it's not open to the public, so it's very essential to rebrand that and entrench that within Delmarva, which is why I think our local media outlets are very vital to reach out to. Now, we did quantify the results with the farmers market. For the first time ever, we've had 65 vendors at the market. That's vendor registration. Sure, it's $25 per vendor, but it brings in a ton of positive advertisement. Folks come here to visit for a day, a week, or even stay here because they love what we offer, and that's largely because of the commercial. So we've had people who saw the farmers market ad and said, I want to sign up. And when that television ad went out, we had a spike. Like I said, 65 vendors. That's like unheard of here.
Okay, so I think you answered my question. So the question I had before this evening, but it kind of was how effective and efficient is the $125,000, and can you gauge it? But you kind of answered that. JB, from your experience with other homeowners where you've worked, do you feel that this is something that definitely adds value? And the same thing for Denise. I mean, I'm just asking. I'm not saying it doesn't.
We've got to be in the marketplace on promoting ourselves, separate from what gets reported in the news. Like I said, I have worked for communities that have no budget whatsoever for this. At the same time, I worked for some who have started to get into that. I've seen a proposal from one company, not for here, but for a prior location, that was about $500,000 a year, and for those types of things. And that's, I don't think we need to go there.
We're not.
Exactly. But to not do anything, I don't think is the.
And that's my question.
And I agree with you. I'm not a marketing expert. I'm looking at this from the perspective of an organization that's, over the last 2 years, has estimated $1.4 million going out the door that we can't fund. Is this an area where we can take another look at and try to bring some costs down?
Right.
That's how I'm looking at it.
I agree.
Well, I think identifying the trolleys is one, and there may be a few other ones in here. But I think the bigger pieces of it, if you would, I think are right on.
May I make a comment? It seems to me that we should be marketing this place to the people who live here more. Last year's budget and last year's efforts seem to have been driven, particularly say the
Agreed.
iClub or whatever. Let's get more people from Ocean City or someplace else to come in here and enjoy our amenities. We don't get nearly enough revenue from the people who live here on a per capita basis. So I think it might make more sense, makes more sense to me, maybe not to anybody else, that we focus our marketing on the people who live here. We have 4,000 somewhat properties that are year-round residents here. And, you know, the recent decisions, you know, and you and I, Jay, just talked about using this place for the winter time. But providing opportunities for people here to enjoy themselves and each other, I think should be our focus in marketing. That's my 2 cents.
And I agree, it's really hard to reach, I think, not only the residents, but the visitors with just one medium. I mean, not everyone's reading the newspaper, not everyone is watching television, not everyone is listening to the radio. So you do have to put your message out there across so many different platforms. So it's very vital to be in the marketplace within television, because a lot of folks, for instance, I had several calls and who just came in recently, but they were watching the Golden Globes and they said, we want to sponsor the anniversary. So I've been locking in sponsorship commitments because they saw how eager we are as a community and the growth of us as a community just by viewing that one commercial. So it is very much effective, and there is some give and take, and I think it is worth the investment.
In going through under the contractual services and the postage and the printing, you'll see most of that is in-house marketing. The newsletters, the activity guides. Prior to getting this position, I was up here every summer for vacation for a number of years. You know, I would go to the website, I'd download it. When I was here, my sister-in-law had copies of it sitting on the counter for all the visitors that would come and stay at their place. There's a significant amount in the budget for marketing to ourselves. There are other things that we can do, probably do better, and I think you'll see those changes going forward at I should say no cost, but it's relatively in-house cost of doing a lot of this internal marketing to our own folks, and how we get that message out. For example, if we were to open up turns here shortly for the winter period, you know, how do we do that? That's by email blast and press releases and postings and utilizing our various interest groups that have separate email addresses. How many email addresses do we have?
We have well over 50,000, and that's broken into different interests and niches.
Right. So you know, when we send out an e-blast, if we want to send it to everybody, that's a lot of
We have
touches.
50,000?
Yes.
That's a good number.
Yes.
50,000 email addresses we mail to?
No, not that I use, it's just that we have access to these
If we wanted to.
accounts. And we've had them for over a number of years. So some of them may be outdated, but it's over the creation of our constant contact account until now, we have close to 50,000.
Right. And your text alerts, how many people signed up for that?
Well, that's new.
Right, but how-
Newly installed, I would say close to 1,000.
All right, close to 1,000 on the text alerts. But we've got 12,000 people that live here, probably 11,900 that have cell phones.
Yeah.
And, you know, so to be able to do other types of messaging, particularly, you know, say there's, we wanted to do a special sometime just because of whatever reason, you know, if it's Friday at 4 o'clock, we can get it out there to however many people we want to. And that's not an additional cost, that's just time on the staff's side to do it. So,
How are you advertising this text alert capability on the website?
Yes. via eBlast, which is a weekly email news blast. It's advertised within every police-related press release. We've actually put out press releases, we put out full-page ads. There is a good
And
subscription.
you can sign up for this?
Yes, at
on
no
the website.
charge. And that's just focusing on emergency alerts. If there's a crime trend that the public would need to know about, that's something that comes at the discretion of the chief. I push that information out.
I keep my ear pretty close to the rail. It's the first time I ever heard of it.
Oh,
Yeah, it's the first time I'm hearing about it too.
we can
I mean,
do,
it sounds like a great program for the 85 people that know about it. Or who-
There's a
whatever
marketing
number.
opportunity.
Yeah, there is.
well, you have to be careful because we advertised it as an emergency alert program, which is totally different than an advertising program. Because some folks who want to know about the snow events or major crime alerts
Don't wanna know about
don't
that.
want to know about who's performing at the Cove. And with the FCC, they're very strict as to who you subscribe and how you reach them and how often you do so. So we can,
What scares me is I've never seen these ads you're talking about that talk about this program.
we are more than happy to relaunch and push it even more.
Where were the ads placed?
They were placed in local newspapers.
Newspapers or driveway trash can liners?
And there is a difference.
Don't answer that.
Yes.
No, seriously,
also-
there's a huge difference between a free newspaper thrown in your driveway and the Daily Times that costs you $1.50. Daily Times, a newspaper.
Was it, and I read the quarterly,
Yeah, so also, yeah,
it
it
was
was
in the quarterly.
inclusive of
I
that.
must have missed it. I'm one of those guys, JB, that reads it, and you're gonna say it was there. I missed it.
Yeah,
Well,
it
that's
was,
all right.
I read it and I didn't see it.
Well, and that goes for repetition
Yeah.
of what we do. I mean, with the number of residents that we have, we're not all gonna see it
yeah.
with one time out.
Property owners.
Property owners, members,
Yeah.
tenants,
You
et
got half
cetera.
as many residents as you have property owners.
And just to, Denise, you're absolutely correct in regard to faxes and things of that nature. And again, as part of the job I had in the insurance business, I handled those blast fax cases for our company for years. And unless there's specific approval to send that information out, we can be liable for, or the insurance company can be liable for a lot of money. So, yeah, you need to keep a tight rein on that too.
It was inclusive of 3 issues of the quarterly newsletter, but like I said, we were more than happy to push it even more.
My sense is we have quite a bit of capacity at the Cove for receptions and weddings and things. Is there a marketing opportunity there to
Yeah, she's got a
target
couple.
that and grow that?
That's a good idea.
business?
Yes, we do utilize Metropolitan Magazine as well as Coastal Style Magazine, which are the big money makers and widely distributed magazines within the area. Regionally speaking, we utilize Baltimore Bride Magazine. That's like the mother lode of bridal guide for the area. If you're a bride in the, I would say, Mid-Atlantic region, you're subscribing to that magazine. And we not only get a full-page ad in that magazine, but we also attend the bridal show. So there is face-to-face interaction.
They give you any copy, any stories?
Editorial copy? No, because we're not paying. If you were to go and do a 2-page, full-page ad, which is really expensive, then sure, they'll offer, complimentary copies to supplement. But that's not in the budget. But with the bridal show, we're allowed to make that face-to-face engagement
And
with
that was
brides.
this past weekend, right?
Well, that was
Or
the
that was a different- that was
Delmarva.
the Delmarva one.
So yes, we do a lot with the bridal aspect of the Cove.
Why is our wedding business so drastically off?
Well, we pull people in.
It's not for marketing purposes.
Exactly, so we
Well, I mean, I
attract
don't know. I just
folks.
know that 10 years ago, we had,
Millennials don't get married.
Maybe we should start a divorce company.
I tell you what, that'd
got-
probably be a
Well,
bigger
they can't get
party.
divorced if they
We
don't
got,
get
we got
married.
4 calls yesterday.
Divorce celebration.
That's excellent.
Divorce party, that's the
Yeah.
thing, right?
That's even after we announced we had a mold issue. We still got 4 calls for
Oh,
weddings
really?
later on.
Good.
So,
Well, I can tell
It
you,
used
this
to be a
past
big
weekend in
chunk,
Salisbury, we got well over
It will be.
50 brides who were in dire need of a location. And they've already heard about us. They sought us out and they said, we registered for this bridal show so we can talk to you, because we know that the list is probably slim to none to get on when it comes to availability or vacancy. They don't really know what we have. But we are widely sought after, so I wouldn't say that, at least the allure is gone. We're still sought after.
Who does
We're
the
sought after,
follow-up?
but we've been falling down.
The-
We'll have to
no.
get that.
The bridal
Get that back.
expert, so that would be the events coordinator, which is the food and beverage department.
Okay. So we have somebody.
I just bring folks to the door and they welcome them in and hopefully keep them in. That's,
So we have somebody that's answering the phone and returning calls when someone makes an inquiry regarding.
that, I am that person, I'm the line
Wedding.
of communication, then I
Okay.
forward the information over to
I just want to make
our
sure we have
bridal
somebody answering
expert.
the phone. where-
Yeah, oh
We
yeah.
we didn't when we had a full-time person, but you are now the coordinator of events?
I am not now the
No.
coordinator of the
Who
events.
gets that phone call? Because I've been asked already.
You give them to me right now, and then I will
Right.
get them a hold
I
of
want to
somebody.
give
Right.
them to somebody else.
Oh, it's in transition.
We'll talk.
I'll
So-
send it off.
One of the things I always liked being in finance is when we had meetings with the sales group and the marketing group, revenue group and sales group. So I look at here, and you kind of almost, you answered it before something happened, but when revenue is not going up, I would hear the salespeople say, well, it's the marketing. The marketing less the sales. So our sales are here, our revenue is here, it's kind of static. You did a great job answering Larry and everything, but where does our marketing come in? Like where, why, what's happening? Where's the disconnect there? Your opinion, whatever.
I think we need to hone in on one uniform theme, and we need to stick to it. I think due to the turnover, due to some changes that are impromptu, it's hard to really push something out and see that it doesn't stick. For instance, and this is just hypothetically
Yeah,
speaking,
no,
if we were to go with entertainment at Turn Grill, which was well received, if we were to continue that, and if I were to actually put it out and broadcast and advertise it, I need to make sure that the food and beverage department actually follows through and carries it out. And if we're saying John Doe is performing on Friday, then John Doe needs to perform on Friday. So sure, we need to work cohesively and make sure that the promise is delivered, because if we keep promising to the public and we don't
That-
deliver.
The
that
question
goes-
is,
that goes
what's
to
gonna
that
be
whole
different this year?
restructuring
Right,
of the food
exactly.
and beverage.
No,
So it's
no,
just
I said
another
hypothetically
example of
speaking.
how it affected everything. I mean, it's
Yes.
well taken, and
Yeah.
I totally got it. So that's another opportunity to grow revenue, exactly what Denise said, working with the proper, whatever,
Right.
side by side. That's what I wanna
A
hear.
lot of coordination.
That's what I wanna hear.
and That led to part of the problem this past
I
year.
understand. But that's what I wanna hear.
Yeah. Follow up on that when we're talking about this stagnant revenue stream. We have an increase in payroll in this department of 5%. Is there a new person, or is this,
This was, what was it, the intern?
Well, that was the intern as well as marketing, we brought that in-house.
Yeah,
So-
we.
Well, the graphic
the
design.
graphic design we
yeah.
brought in-house instead of contracted out, so there's
okay.
a piece
So
there.
that-
So it went from
Yeah.
one line to the other, is that it?
Yeah,
Yeah,
Yeah, I can see that somewhere?
Because, I mean, it seems like a reasonable payroll, it's just, I didn't.
I
it's
think
a
that was in your
5%
summary
jump.
too. Wasn't that in your executive summary too?
And then, Jim, if it's okay, Denise, so I'm looking at total revenue, I see you're working on it compared to this prior year. You have a budget that's going up, but if I go back a couple of years, I see that, it was over $60,000 in 2017. What happened, what can we do, what can't we do? Why aren't we in the 60s? So 2017, something's different.
Advertising was off.
Well, that's what I'm gonna find out.
the deferred payments for advertising dollars.
You don't wanna do it?
What's it,
Don't go there?
well, no, it's fine. Art, you wanna jump in on that?
Yeah.
2017.
Right.
There was an audit entry made. The auditor didn't make it. The current director of finance made that entry, which was $8,000 that should have been in this year as opposed to last year. And we just weren't, we didn't spot it until after, everything's done.
So it's a mistake.
Thank you, Marty. So it's a timing thing, all right. Okay, so it was growing, it's just, okay. Got it.
Deferred payments for
Okay.
newsletter advertisement.
We're booked into the
We're putting
previous
into the wrong
year's
fiscal year.
revenue when they shouldn't have been.
Yeah.
What are grants?
Okay.
From the county, we get, I would say over a number of years, we get a number of grants for the tourism department.
Do you get anything in the state, from Maryland, state of Maryland?
No, just the county. Yeah.
Can we apply?
I can look into it. I'm actually looking into mini grants now.
There are a number of places that.
Yeah, I'll look into that.
We might have a problem of not being able to take on this state capital. We might.
Yeah.
Yeah, ignore it.
Yeah.
Drive forward.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'll keep going at it.
So I gotta get my social security and stuff. Okay, I have a question.
Maybe wait for them to get more.
Can't hear you, Joe.
Speaking of marketing and public relations, I think is doing a fantastic job on the stuff that they put out to the public. I'm not so sure, I tend to agree with Larry on this, I'm not so sure $35,000 in television, radio ads are, that we're getting a reasonable return on that. So I would consider a possibility with that, try to figure out whether we can determine how much of a return we're getting. But the fundamental problem is not the money. The fundamental problem is that this lady, who is our Director of Marketing Public Relations, is doing a good job marketing something that too many people don't want. We have a failure at the delivery point, not at the promotion point. And until we solve the problem at the delivery point on some of our amenities, she could have the best promotions ever seen by mankind, and it won't do any good. So the two have to be tied together, which you brought up. in
Right,
terms of
that's
sales
exactly.
versus Expenses for
Yep,
promotion.
I completely agree with you.
That's a fundamental problem.
Right. Yep. Duly noted here.
He's referring to, like, what she said.
Just put down about the sales versus, I don't know what it is versus market. I totally agree, right? I see it the same way.
Delivering
So-
on what we're marketing is what he's
Right.
saying.
And again, it ties to that one certain situation, how it affects us in finance, so many other places. Yes. Okay.
Well, yeah,
Got it.
you have to be if you're gonna market something, you have to be competitive.
You gotta make sure you got a good product.
Well, you
to
gotta
begin
be
with,
able-
is
you
what
gotta
Joe's
deliver
saying.
You
what
gotta
you
deliver
promise.
what you promise.
Right, exactly.
But you have to be competitive, both in quality,
Right.
service, and price.
Right.
That's not difficult to understand.
You don't have to, we've proven that.
All right, we're watching the time here. Okay.
Yeah, I start charging.
No,
him
good
for
points.
wine.
Anybody else on,
Marty's got something.
Yeah,
oh, I'm sorry.
Is the farmer's market in this budget?
Yes, it's inclusive. It's not its own ledger or item line. Are you talking expenses or revenue?
Both.
The expenses,
What I'm getting at is, are we making money with the farmer's market?
yes.
Okay?
You'll see that in the miscellaneous tab 398. Am I correct, Art?
398.
Three what?
Miscellaneous
Page 5.
398.
Oh,
revenues.
that's,
5-1.
Line 398.
Line 398.
Got it. So some part of that $11,000 is revenues generated by the farmer's
I
market.
believe it's all,
That's all of it.
yes.
Oh, really?
It's
That's
summer
correct.
fees, winter fees, all together, whatever they're
Yes.
signed up for.
Well, we
Good
may
job.
rename
Relatively
miscellaneous
little
farmer's
cost.
market.
Right?
Well, we have some music, and some greeting people.
Yeah, I saw that
Let's
earlier.
rename the line item.
We were working on that, yeah. That'll be nice.
It is what it is. It's farmer's market, not miscellaneous.
That's a good idea.
Yeah.
Wait a minute, you've got
Yeah, see, that-
$3,000 in music for the farmer's market? Yeah, I'd like to see that broken down. I'm willing to bet you it's not making as much money as it's.
It's 200 a month for Charlie, who performs
Well,
live.
let's do it on the spot. Let's get that back to you in
You
the
mind?
format of
It's
a
just-
sheet. Here's a breakdown on farm, here's our revenue, here's our expenses.
Yeah.
That's what
Okay.
you want.
I
Good,
need to be
you got that.
doubting Thomas, I just never.
That's all right.
And again, just to add to that, even if it's not making money, if it's breaking even or just a little bit below, I think that farmer's market is a great thing for this community. And, you know, I think it's fine.
Breaking even, it can't possibly be a bad thing.
Wait a second, somebody record that.
John, do we want to recommend, as Jim was talking about, reviewing the expenses, what they're advertising, their promotional, the items? Like he mentioned, the $3,100 for the trolley.
We'll take out the $3,100 for the trolleys.
I was
Well,
looking a little larger. Do we want them to recommend that they reevaluate all that? Or
I think we agreed that the marketing cost is definitely needed. They were gonna review what they spend. You know, Joe's point, my point is basically what's happening in this situation where we have something else, and she really believes, and I believe, that when we fix something else, that marketing will become even more effective and drive it. Am I reading that right? Then the question comes, if we have a bad product, should we even market it? I hope we don't come to that conclusion, but that's, you know, so, that's, if I answered your question, that's it. Is, we're staying the course with the marketing. Yeah, I don't know about that, but the trolley, I don't
The
know,
trolley.
that's something different.
well, that was
Yeah,
that was my
something
question.
different.
That's up to you.
Yeah.
I don't fully understand the trolley.
Stated a different way, if we didn't have any marketing right now,
Right.
the point would be, let's get our operational side
That's
in
right.
order so that we have the right piece to market.
Right.
But we've already got the marketing, and we're doing a lot of things really well.
Oh,
We need
yeah,
to
yeah, yeah.
continue
No,
to market all
that's
that.
the consensus,
The
definitely. Right.
the missing link is that
Right.
operational side on F&B.
Right, and I, to be honest with you, I felt like that in September or whatever, even earlier, that, hey, you know, what are we marketing here? Because I don't even think it's helping it. But we continue to, and again, we have to fix that situation. Marketing, we know is right, is what you're telling us.
I feel, quite honestly, Denise, I feel comfortable that you are explaining the cost-benefit analysis for this. And I assume you track all of this, and, because the question will probably come up again, are we really getting the value for what we're putting out? And it sounds to me like we are.
Marketing's pretty ephemeral. I mean,
Yeah.
there's no, you can't touch it, see it, smell it, the results, unless you get a coupon. Then you know people brought in 10 coupons, whatever. But I think doing a good job.
I do too.
Okay.
All right.
JB, we're good. Denise, thank you very much.
Thank
Do I have
you.
to start giving back these pens that I keep picking up?
That'll save us
There's the
about
marketing
$1,000.
right there.
They are truly
The pins that
expensive,
keep going.
$10,000 worth of pins.
He's got about 30 of them, so you ought to collect some of them.
All right, that's the way to
What,
cut
$300?
expense. Start charging.
Okay, so now it's 11:35 rounded. The next is at 1 o'clock. We do have a lunch break. JB, I'm not sure, did I hear anything, something about food being brought in or
She
something? or
said
no?
she was coming
Yeah.
back at noon.
At
So
noon? So there is
we're-
gonna be food here or some
She'll
type of?
probably be here about 11:45, so 10 or 15 minutes.
Okay, so, to be honest with you, perfect time. Anybody have a question or anything? I mean, as long as it keeps us on track, I'm good. Okay, Joe?
Thank you, Denise.
For Larry, again, on the railroad, or whatever we call it.
The trolley?
That's been around for 4 or 5 years now. I agree with Larry. I think it's useless. And interestingly, the idea that people would use it so they wouldn't have to drive home. Now, think about this. You drive up to the parking lot at if you have to drive to the parking lot at the sports court to get on the trolley, and then the trolley takes you to the yacht club.
Right.
Where's the trolley gonna take you when you leave? Back to the car, you might as well drive to the yacht club.
Right.
The point is, it's
Okay.
a minor item, but it's an irritant, to me personally, as an association, I think it's an insult. The thing is always empty, it's like throwing $3,000 or whatever down a sewer every year.
Here's an interesting research project for somebody. Investigate how many trolleys have been purchased by local governments in the last decade, and compare that to the ridership that have been on it, nationwide.
Save us some time. What's the answer?
It's bad. You know, it's like the sidewalk to nowhere. I
So
mean,
we,
it's like-
so we solved the problem
Well,
for Joe.
But he has it.
In certain communities, yes, it's been real successful. But a lot of places have bought trolleys
I
that
couldn't
have
agree more.
rare people on them, and that's not just you know,
This isn't that type
there
of
is a
community.
certain,
Look at the shore transit bus. Has
And-
anybody ever seen anybody on the shore transit bus?
and what's worse is, when you have the trolley,
Tourist area.
and you have opportunities to use it that would actually produce ridership on it for special events and whatnot, the federal regulations on the use of that trolley prevent you from doing that.
Well, yeah, but that trolley driver has to be the loneliest job in the world.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, if you really examine how that trolley operates, that was the brainchild of the casino. Worcester
here.
County, the first year they initiated, Worcester County paid it. After the first year, Worcester County said this is stupid, they don't even pay anymore.
Right.
We still pay, we're still stupid. That trolley is meant to take people from Ocean Pines to spend their money someplace else. Yes, it is. That's the whole design of the entire thing.
Well,
Sounds like we got it
and that's
solved.
the trolley here. But in general, trolleys have been small, certain communities, they work great. But if you don't have a whole lot of ridership, for example, Urbana, Virginia has a trolley, and we could not use it for special events to take people on a trip to, you know, Walmart or wherever. We couldn't utilize it that way because federal regulations prevent it.
Ocean City uses theirs that way, but they start here and go there.
Yeah, you'll be back.
Right, and back and forth. It's a box, if you will.
Yeah.
I gotta take a phone call at 12.
That one, I don't think.
Oh, I agree.
I got you covered in case something comes up.
Hopefully there's an office over there I can go for 10 minutes.
Yeah.
Phil. Okay, so good. Any questions on anything we gotta talk about as a team or anything? Everything's good?
Right on schedule.
John, you got any notes?
I got a few. I've got a few things. I'll let you weed it out.
That's fine. That's what, it went smooth last year.
Pardon me?
It went smooth last year, whatever I got for this
Yeah.
meeting.
I think last year's recommendation could be probably plugged into this year's recommendations in large part.
Well, no, that he didn't take the sales of it.
Pardon me?
I think last year was more revenue geared, our comments. I think this year would be more
Expenses.
Expense side, yeah.
I've got,
That's the rest.
Yeah.
that's what I have, number one on
Last
finance.
year's problem revenue, now we'll do the expense side, and what the hell we'll do next year.
John,
JB, that's JB.
gee, I meant to ask on, I guess one of these, there was an $80,000 revenue increase. Maybe it was a yacht club. There was no business plan or model or anything along with, in the budget that would justify
Yeah, I
it.
saw the golf numbers.
And I didn't know how you
forecast
guys came up with that number. And
It
we
was
don't
not
need to
doing
do
the
that.
business we did this year.
Pardon me?
It was not doing the
Right,
business
was it
plan we
under
did
100? I'm
this.
trying to, I got
Basically.
mixed up with the numbers, the first one.
The business plans are only as good as those who enact them.
Right.
So,
You want the
There's
yacht club?
114, I'm doing it from memory, and that's not very good.
Right where we,
Did you have business
nobody's
plans
complaining
or?
about it.
There was no
Nobody's
business
jumping up and down
plan
about it. He's not yelling to sell
for
it.
budgeting $500,000 more in revenue than we'd had in prior years.
Okay.
None.
mean,
No
a couple of years
marketing
he wasn't
plan,
willing to sell
no
it yet,
research,
right?
nothing.
So we're
It
in
was
like
just,
17, 18.
we,
2 years ago, I think we got,
somebody
Oh,
was
just the
told that we
100,
could produce, well,
These are all actions.
somebody, Brad,
Right.
asked a few people, and they said, oh, you can make, you know, do this and this and this, and you should clear another.
So the difference between this number and that number is
And
100.
that was the business
that was the
plan.
business plan, yeah.
And the
So
bud-
I went
that's
back
the-
to prior year
Wait a
actual,
minute, this is versus budget
you
or
know,
versus?
and,
So that's
like on the
not
yacht
against
club,
budget, that's purely what we lost, the 100.
not
So if we
the net
budgeted
revenue,
100,
but
then
the-
we're flat.
the net revenue
So this
was
is
plug in the
pure
numbers
against actual,
that
not against budget.
Budget's real.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
to me
That's
actually
what I'm saying, this is versus
more comparable
pure,
to
so I don't know what the budget was, but
marketplace.
we gotta be
And
favorable
then the
to it.
revenue was based off of actuals.
Pure. Now, this includes,
So,
I combine food
You know,
and
we
beverage
went 1.8,
with golf
1.9,
on this one.
1.9, 1.8, 1.7,
This is
and
golf
then we
and food
budgeted
beverage.
2.2.
And of course, maintenance is in there,
Our
yes.
forecast this year was 1.5,
This is everything.
and that was on a bad year.
And this is just.
I was looking at
So
revenue,
the
it wasn't yacht
1.6, I think, is very reasonable to get to.
Okay,
It's
well, the
already
forecast for this
included.
year is
Wait,
Wait, where am I? So I'm
157.
losing, wait, turning costs, no, wait, making money? They said it was losing.
1.527.
Right.
I was kind of wondering
I see here
what
down here.
was going to be done to generate the
Right,
additional
47, so you're saying it made
$80,000.
money?
No.
All right, going back to.
And how am I reading
Well,
this?
no,
Cost of
just, you've
sales.
got
This
the
is
draft
revenue.
Right, so
for
revenue-
19
oh, I'm sorry,
is
yeah,
105, I'm sorry, I looked at the
1.607.
Right, so 105.
Gotta go to the back.
And
Our
18
expenses.
forecast is
And
1.527,
then
Right.
$80,000 difference.
Right.
I'm just kind of
We
wondering,
lost 31,000 golf.
what do you,
Well, we were
offset-
just weekends only in November and December,
It's unacceptable, of course.
so that's part of it. But,
okay, that's
you know,
all right.
and that's part of it, but
When
again,
you do the
going back
golf,
to prior year
I need this,
actuals.
or I'm gonna
That's
refer to you
achievable.
to.
Yeah,
based on-
we're
Exactly.
19, 18, 16, I mean, 18, 19,
Yeah.
19, 17, and this is net, and down to 106. So
To-
we're
to
actually
1
going
o'clock.
less than what we have
Less
done
than what's
before.
done, right.
And what more than this current year. This is your
That makes sense.
I gave a cut.